I'm gonna start this in live now.
Yeah.
Okay.
That whole National Association of Black Journalists shit.
Oh
That
yeah,
had me that
we'll
had me
definitely talk.
that had me laughing too. I was
All right, hold on. And I'm just trying to get the Rockfin live also. Okay, cool. And then I think Facebook should be going live too. I gotta double check it because last time it was all jacked up as far as why does it keep I gotta open it up. The privacy is showing for only me and this is supposed to be public. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Now we're good to go. So, hello, everybody. This is the Political Matrix. I am one of your hosts, Marcus Young Morpheus Cage, here with my brother Cy Lawson and a very special guest, our friend of the show, brother from INN, Collin Radix-Carter. How we doing?
Not bad, Marcus. How are you? And Sai, how are you?
Oh shoot,
You just-
Chris just dropped out. But I guess we'll see him shortly. He'll be back. Um, and also shout out to everybody, whether you're watching from YouTube, Rockfin, or Facebook, because with some of the new stuff that Elon has done, I'm gonna start doing more live streams onto Facebook. Hold on, let me fix that real quick. So if I'm looking down and doing a whole bunch of stuff, I'm trying to watch all of the different comments. So apologies if I seem like I'm not focused. But so we got a lot of topics. Of course, we got the Trump versus the NAJB, which is the National what is it? National American Black Journalists, or I can't
Yeah,
remember what the A is. Okay.
yeah. The National Association of Black Journalists.
Association. That's what I knew. That I knew American didn't sound right. Um, shout out to our friends that are already in the chat getting active. I also wanted to say real quick to La Senora Chamonique, if you would like to get on to discuss Venezuela with us, please let me know. I'll put a link out there and you can definitely hop on with us. I would love to have some of your feedback and have you in the discussion. So just putting that invitation out there if you are interested. um Shout out to Game.Films, Jared Brown's in the building also, and then everybody else who hops in later. I see my boy Sir Trip over there on the Facebook side, so glad to see you here. But the topics that we're going to get into, of course, we're going to talk about that. I do want to talk a little bit about Venezuela, of course. We're going to talk about Sabby's panel. Collin was part of that panel, and it went into probably about 7 different topics dealing with Black issues. And so we kind of wanted to give some of our takes on it. I want to give some of my takes on the panel itself and just some of the topics. So that's some of what we're going to talk about. And everybody out in the comment section, please throw in your comments on those different topics also. Couple of topics that I just wanted to throw out there because they are getting a whole lot of airtime. And I kind of wanted to hear my guests thoughts on some of this stuff also. Oh shoot, trips up. Oh, okay, good. It's showing it over there. Thanks for the shout out. I'm here listening to someone elite. Nah, you're elite, my brother. But there was a whole lot of fuss made about the Algerian boxer, and I wanted to push back on that because I heard even after a lot of the people have kind of stepped in it and they've made comments without kind of going through and being nuanced about the situation. I kind of wanted to talk about it just a little bit so we can clear up some of the details, at least from our perspective, at least from our show, so you know where we stand on the issue and what we're trying to add to the discussion so we can kind of limit some of the misinformation. So Collin, are you familiar with the situation?
A little bit. I will admit I haven't been watching the Olympics at all. So I do know, not entirely, so maybe you can help me out with this. But I've seen murmurs of it online over the last few days. So if you don't mind kind of filling in the gaps for me, then yeah.
Okay.
Don't
So,
know.
so to my brother here, and to those out there who are not familiar with well, what's going on, you have in the Olympics, you have a woman coming out of Algeria, um, named I'm sorry if I butcher the pronunciation, Iman Khalif. Um, she was boxing against Italy, and after 46 seconds into the boxing match, the Italian representative said that she felt like she was being hit harder than she's ever been felt. She knelt out. She felt like this was not a safe environment, and that led to a lot of people online saying that this was a trans this was a trans
Trans woman.
woman, so from male to female transition in the Olympics. And oh, it's not fair that men are in there beating up on women, and all of this stuff got around before any of the actual evidence got out. I saw a whole bunch of people say, oh yeah, born as a male and all of these things. Well, the facts are that Aman was born as a female. Has as far as the information I've been able to find, it has everything is, you know, all the anatomy is female.
Right.
The issue that was been brought up is that some of the chromosomes actually are XY, and so just because you have XY chromosomes, and then if some people said the testosterone levels are high by the IBA, which is a Russian organization, which was basically discredited around 2019. Some of the rumors, I'll say this is rumors because I haven't verified this part yet. Some of them say that this testosterone testing and all of that stuff has come after Aman has beat Russian fighters, and the same thing with the Chinese fighter who is going under this same high testosterone chromosomes issue, saying that they failed as far as to meet for a actual gender female. Well, you can still have XY chromosomes and be a female.
Right.
You can be presenting testosterone levels is something that as men we don't judge a man's testosterone level. I'm pretty sure if you looked at somebody like a Mike Tyson probably has higher testosterone levels than a lot of other men.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, then that would should we disqualify top athletes who might have higher testosterone levels because of oh, it's not fair if I have less than them, or it's not fair that I'm not 6'7", to be able to compete. And so I look at it as, from my perspective, that it's just one of those cases of this is somebody who has a couple of abnormalities the way they were born.
Right.
It's something that they didn't, like, as far as we know, they didn't do anything to alter themselves. They have always they were, as far as they know, they've been born as a woman, they've been raised as a woman, and that's just it. And so they can't help the fact of whatever features that they might have, or that, because I noticed, okay, Iman, she looks very athletic. I'll
Mhm.
say that.
Right.
But I don't see it as like this. I don't see it as. I don't know. I'll leave it there. And what's your thoughts, Colin?
It's, well, we've been seeing this for a while, but I think this trans men, trans women in sports issue, I think especially more on the conservative side, but we kind of seeing this playing out now in terms of sports, like almost this fear slash shaming in terms of, oh, like if they're a trans woman, then they can't compete with other women because they used to be a man, and like vice versa. And I think that's kind of where a lot of these issues have kind of stemmed from, as far as that cultural mindset that I wouldn't say just conservative. I would say conservatives, I think, have led the charge, but I think, liberals have kind of added their voice into it too. And I think it's just like a whole mess. But I will say this, this has been somewhat of an issue anyway, especially within the Black community. Like Michelle Obama still has been characterized as a man because she's more athletic. She's definitely muscular. Like she's tall for her height, but there have been plenty of people who have been questioning, was she born a man or she looks like a man, and like all that kind of stuff. Serena Williams as well. Now, granted, I think in recent years she's had allegedly some work done to herself, but I think just as far as athletically, there were complaints about her too, of her looking like a man and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's kind of interesting that when it comes to people of color, especially, this is what I've seemed to notice, especially among women, and if they tend to be more athletic, that's kind of where, not to say it doesn't happen among white people, but I'm sure there is. But I find I think it's kind of interesting, just even prior to making it a trans issue, just if you're a cis, that if you're a woman, more athletic, or you're stronger or faster or whatever, you're classified, were they men or are they men, and like all that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of the heart of the issue that people are not necessarily talking about. But this I think now it's kind of associated now as being trans, since it's like the trans community has gotten a lot more highlight in media, especially within the last decade, I would argue, couple of decades. But this idea has always been pervasive, as far as, I think, especially among women of color. Like, if they're stronger or better than even Simone Biles, not to say they call her a man, but they kind of question her, in terms of her athletic prowess or whatever. But it's always seems to be associated more with people of color that this seems to come about, versus the other way if it were a white person. Not to say it doesn't happen, but it almost seems like I don't hear about this as regularly as I hear among women of color, especially that idea comes out.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I noticed that this discussion comes up a whole lot more when it's some person of color. I mean, for years and years and years, Russia and China were caught in plenty of doping scandals,
right,
and doing different things like that. And so, how many times were you had, it used to be kind of a running joke in some of these movies where they would make it like the Russian woman is super tall with a deep voice and hairy, and I mean, it's kind of funny that that's never put towards other groups, but it is often focused that way. And then it's going to say, oh well, it's not because of a race thing. I just think that maybe that's an unconscious bias that some of those people have, and it's mind-boggling. I get that what used to be kind of the fringes of the right wing kind of would say all of these different things like that, but now with kind of Elon buying Twitter, it's pushed a lot of these conversations to the forefront way more. And
right.
So before we didn't hear all this, a lot of this stuff that comes from the right wing. Now we're hearing everything. And by the way, shout out to your network over there, INN. I see them on the Rockfin side.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you mentioned Elon because he has a child who's trans. So I believe, I don't want to misgender them, but I believe it's she now. So trans woman. And she went off on Elon, I think, recently, in terms of, how I think he was saying, I think just the way that Elon, wasn't necessarily a good father to her growing up, but then, he kind of neglected her or didn't accept her in terms of, her gender identity or whatever. And, she went off on him in terms of like his failings as a father and then not acknowledging her as far as her experience. Um, so, but yeah, as I said, I think it's getting a lot more attention. I think now it's a lot easier now to kind of say, oh, could this person be trans or whatever, because that's something that conservatives have marketed as kind of like a talking point over the last few years, especially. But this issue, especially when it's dealing with race, has been around forever in terms of like, even back in the day, Black women, known to have a bigger chest, a bigger ass, or whatever else. It was like that wasn't necessarily accepted, especially with white people. It's just those were features that were ostracized, in the Black community. And now that's kind of flipped. Like now you have to have the fat ass and the thick legs and the big chests. And it's almost like, like more accepted now. The very features that you tend to ostracize Black people to have, you have, or you would mark yourselves now as being acceptable to have. So these are kind of issues that I think have been around forever, but it's, as I said, for sorry you just tune in, like for women of color, I think this was more prevalent for years, to the point where that has been even made fun of in comedy. Like I remember like Jamie Foxx, on In Living Color when he did Wanda, like with the blonde hair, the tight dress, like came off like, you remember if you're old enough, like that was almost seen as funny, but looking back at it now is almost it was almost feeds into the idea of like, and I'm speaking for Black women who are more athletic, who might be stronger, like might be classified as, oh, are they a man or were they born the man? That kind of thing. So I think it's kind of the perfect storm of having that not ideology, but like having that thought that has existed, elevated now with the idea of trans people. It's just become a perfect storm of controversy now, especially in sports, and then lifestyle in terms of the trans community wanting to be more recognized and push back from that, and how that relates to, for them existing in terms of a cisgendered world, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what's your thoughts on this? I know we talked about it a little bit yesterday about the Amin Khalif boxing Olympics thing, but yeah, I kind of want to hear your take.
I mean, initially, I'm sure you guys already covered it. Initially, it came out that she was a man. Then it's revealed that she was born a woman. So there was some confusion there. In fairness to everybody, the appearance, how she looks to your eye, she does have a more masculine look to her, right? She can't help that,
Right.
There's nothing she could do about that. It's just how she came out. She's responsible for that, just like you're responsible for how you look, and same here with me, right? The conversation before people had enough facts, everybody was jumping out the window. Specifically, I heard you mention Elon Musk and the right wing. They went crazy with it, pushing it, that this was a man beating up on a woman. I'll admit, at first, it looked like that to me. Once the information came out, it was like, all right, well, this person just has a different genetic makeup. Maybe it makes them appear a certain way versus not. But then when you take into consideration the country of origin, Algeria, that is not exactly California. That is not exactly, England or France, where you could easily just say, hey, I recognize myself as this speaker right next to me, and everybody is okay with that. Algeria, they don't play that shit. They don't. So the people pushing it really should have taken that much into account as well. Because once I learned it was an Algerian person, I'm like, yeah, wait a second. They don't even play them type of games in that, in Algeria like that, in that part of the world, at least as it pertains to, trans people and being, out and very, very vocal about your sexual preference. That's not a place where you could be doing that, or where you could just be saying, hey, call me, here are my pronouns. That's not allowed in their culture, you know? So, Indy, what's up, man? Um, so with that being said, I think everybody should calm down. We know it's a woman. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Really, that's what it's about. But everything can be used for political purposes, because it immediately turned from this quote, man is beating this woman, to this is what Kamala wants and Trump is against it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a fan of either, but it was just dumb to make that connection, because I mean, it's happening regardless. The shit was happening under Trump. Pronouns was coming out. People were saying things, so if it happened under Biden, it'll happen under Trump just the same way. Some of these things will continue to happen, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes the rhetoric gets annoying and it gets loud at times, but sometimes you have to be able to control your emotions and pay the rhetoric no mind. Because even as a Black person, now we're in the political season. It now seems to be the subject of the hour, Black people in America as it relates to politics. I keep hearing the term low information voter, and I really want to keep getting upset or worked up when I hear that. But it's like, what? This is the same old bullshit they do every single cycle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's, I don't know, I got mixed feelings about that term, because I hate to admit this, but um, a lot of times, especially in our community, our focus is not on voting. Our focus is not on learning anything about politics, not on learning politicians, not on learning anything outside of what affects me in my day to day. I'm not saying the whole entire Black community, but I'm saying a good chunk. And I'm saying even ones who do vote on a regular basis. Plenty of times, our mamas, our fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles are voting for people who have no clue about anything this person really stands for, or what they're actually accomplishing or not accomplishing, and running out there making excuses based on whatever they've heard on Fox News, or what they heard on TMZ, or what they heard on MSNBC or ABC. And since this show probably will be focused a lot more on Black issues, especially like we're being highlighted from both sides right now, especially with this Trump interview, which we'll get into. I do kind of want to address that elephant in the room that a lot of people won't just call out. I mean, I'm not proud to say that. It's not something that makes me happy to talk about, that a lot of people in the Black community are not are just not politically savvy, or even understand a lot of stuff that's going on. In my perspective, people can disagree with me, but we'll get into that, more as we talk about some of this stuff.
To that point, I would say, yeah, there are people who in our community, without a doubt, who don't know shit. I mean, I'm not even going to try to sugarcoat it and be, nice about it. There's a lot of people you have discussions with, and it's just like, I wish we didn't, right? Because you just really are, you don't know what you're talking about, and, pity them. But anyway, but that applies to everybody. That doesn't just apply to us. So in the discussion, I hate that the focus of the term low information is aimed at people who look like we do. Especially
I think
saw
it's all.
CNN.
I just brought it up in
CNN
particular for I just brought it up in particular for our community, because our community is, I want to say, one of the least served. And are looking for something, and it's the most expectations on our community, but yet the least return on that investment. That's the
Right.
reason why I focus, our
That's
community. But
true.
yeah,
And you know
it's
what?
across the board for everybody.
That's true. But part of what's funny is the term low information would probably be applied to somebody like myself because I'm not into choosing a side. But unfortunately, it's our mamas, aunties, cousins, nieces who are at the forefront of the political um, microphone, if you will, or megaphone, if you will. They're the loudest, most involved. Even we're going to touch on the interview with Trump with the black journalist. You couldn't find one dude. There wasn't one guy you could put up there. You know what I'm saying? Everything they do is catered to the black woman to try to drag along the rest of us. Clearly, that's not a good strategy because it always results in vote for Democrat, vote blue, no matter who. You're supporting the same people, and then you have these complaints afterwards, but you didn't ask for anything. You didn't tell them, hey, in order to get my vote, you have to do something, anything, even if it wasn't for you specifically. I mean, damn, what are they even getting out of this? They don't vet any candidates. You know what I mean? Stacey Abrams was put on the pedestal. Oh, yeah, vote for Stacey Abrams. Did anybody even look into who she's aligned with, connected with, getting money for, moving money for, anything? Same with Kamala. Get behind Kamala. Who's pushing this? Auntie, I love you, but y'all got to sit down right now. Y'all in your 60s and y'all 70s, maybe late 50s. You got to relax. You're not plugged in as much as you think you are. I understand you understand the economic issues and how much things are costing, etc. But the people that you're interested in have no desire to want to address any of that. So just keep that in mind, before you get upset at what somebody like myself is saying. It's not a bunch of us. I mean, I'm not the only one who's saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a feeling it's going to get really interesting when we start going into some of the topics of that panel. Before we get into that, though, I kind of wanted to, I guess, did we want to bring on Venezuela real quick, or did we want to just go into the Trump interview? Actually, you know what? Let's do Venezuela real quick, and then we'll go because my thoughts on it are pretty quick and succinct. I don't know which one of you gentlemen want to go first.
Well, let me ask real quick. So are they saying that they're disputing? Okay, so for the people who didn't know, Venezuela last week had an election, right? This audience is pretty much, on point with shit. So they're familiar, I'm sure. So Venezuela had an election last week, right? And the West is disputing the results. So the question I have for Collin and for Marcus today is, are they disputing the results between this guy, what's his name, Gonzalez, and Guaido? Because the last I heard that Guaido was the president. So I don't know why they're even mentioning Maduro, because as far as I'm concerned, by the State Department and all the pronouncements from all of the international governments, they all said Guaido was president. So are they saying Guaido is the winner or the loser? I'm confused here.
Well,
they memory hold Guaido.
I think I can keep this as basic and succinct as possible in saying why are we concerned about other people's election, other countries' elections when we can't even get a handle on ours?
Well, not every country has that amount of that black gold, as they call it, under the ground, right?
And you have to ask this. You have to ask this. It's that if the U.S. has seemingly an interest in a foreign country in this, among other ways, the question should always be asked: what do we want from that country to exploit?
I was going to say, what resources do they possess?
Yeah, but that's what I'm heading to. It's like, what resources are we trying to exploit? What government are we trying to take over? Like, these are the questions that we should be asking every single time when it comes to foreign policy. And you know, we're upset because we don't have our puppet necessarily in there. Whereas the Venezuelan people made their stand and basically I would argue, true democracy and like, oh, no, this is the person that we want. And the U.S. has an issue with that because we
Well,
can't
I would
control that.
actually, Collin, I would argue with you and say that Gonzalez is the U.S. and WB, not WBO. What was I gonna say? I'm sorry, getting boxing mixed up in my head. But we're not the WHO. What I'm thinking, World Economic Forum, WEF. I believe that's their pick. That's the ultra capitalists that they're trying to get in there, to get their soft coup in a sense, like they've always tried to do throughout most of Latin America and Africa. So I think that's sorry. Let me give it back to you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that part. That's their pick.
No, but even with that, that's the question we should be asking is like, why are we so invested in foreign nations' politics? And like, you know, and I know your audience is probably pretty savvy to this. It's like what resources and all of that. So yeah, so it's just kind of like, as I say all the time, my show tale is old as time. It's just like countries that I would argue we should have an investment in or should care more about, we ignore, but then other countries that are bombing or exploiting their resources or whatever, we have a curious sense of, oh, we don't like this or we don't like that. And I'm sure we're going to get into it later. This is kind of what I mentioned at the panel that I was in with Sabi the other night. And it's the idea of like the things that we do in other nations ultimately have an effect of what happens in this country to, in effect, happens within the Black community. So you don't like, and I said this on stream, you don't like immigrants coming here. Well, you have to ask why they're coming in the first place. Like, if we're taking resources from all these other nations, or like we're doing like all these soft coups to where the government is out of whack, that people do not feel safe, and America, unfortunately, is still, well, the West, I will argue, but like America in particular is known as like, come to me and like I can give you refuge. That's still
we'll take your tired, huddled masses.
Right. There's still that myth in terms of that what America represents, that I think that's generally the go-to. I think especially for Latin America, like that's the go-to, or like if you're anywhere else in the world, Europe possibly. And they come here, and then obviously like Black areas are going to be cheaper than other areas, like, so that's where they settle, and that's kind of where, you know, Black communities, and I'll argue rightly so, like are getting pissed off because the government might give more amenities to immigrants than they might to Black to native-born Blacks who grew up in those communities or states or whatever. But we have to ask this from a more macro question as to, well, why would people be so willing? Like, and I could say this as an immigrant myself, it takes a lot for you to even think about the possibility of uprooting yourself from one country to another. It's not desirable.
Hell, it's hard for a lot of people to move to another city or state.
Oh, hell, it's hard for me to move to a house in the same city. Exactly. So it's the idea of like, if people are willing to uproot themselves from one country to another, where especially if you're coming from Latin America, you may not know English, you have to learn English, and especially if you're educated, your credits may not count for anything, so you have to take like a lower income wage job in order to make yourself, whereas like you may be a doctor or whatever in your home country, and you may have to be a janitor here. Like that's not desirable for a lot of people. But the idea is like, if they're willing to do that, then there has to be a deep-rooted reason as to why that's happening. And this is the kind of curiosity, and I don't want to call our community out, but this is the kind of curiosity that we need to have generally, especially among the Black community, to kind of understand that people are coming here, not always, but usually out of chaos that is happening in those countries that are affected by what we do with we as in the US government. So these are the kind of things that we have to look carefully at in terms of, immigration is because Republicans talk about immigration all the time, like, oh, it's a problem, blah, blah, blah. We need to close the border, blah, blah, blah. But we're not necessarily talking the idea of like, what's making them want to come here in the first place. Now, if we're having these forever wars in these countries, if we're having these drug cartels on our hand in these countries, if economically we're tapping out these countries to the point where it basically is unlivable and they're forced to move, this is what our government leaders are not necessarily saying to you. And that's something that needs to be elevated a lot more, especially in the discourse of talking about immigration in general. But yeah, just to kind of surmise, none of our damn business. Move on.
So I have I could see it from both perspectives. I don't know if you guys saw that receipt from the bodega in Queens that went viral the last couple of days. Did you guys see that?
No.
So one of these migrants from Venezuela left the receipt in the store after she bought whatever she bought. It showed her food stamp balance at over $13,000, and her cash assistance balance was over $5,000. Right. So obviously somebody in the store who came in took a picture of it and was like, yo, this person not even a citizen. They never paid taxes. This is crazy. They got way more bread than, the average person, So I can see why people would feel like that, especially people who are not making enough, who have potentially or possibly applied for some sort of assistance and have been turned away with the rejection being that you've made too much money to qualify. I could see how that could rub some people the wrong way. I could also see how people who live in the city, for instance, are they watch rent control go away. And now they're literally watching people go into these brand new spanking buildings. And again, they ain't pay no taxes, no nothing. They just came here. Now, do I understand that people came here because things are messed up in their countries? Yes, sure. However, there's a lot of, they giving out money, why don't you just come here type of energy too. Because these dudes are having, like, for instance, my homeboy just came from New York this morning, right? I just picked him up from the airport. So I was asking him, what's it looking like out there? You know what I mean? He was like, it's mostly in his particular town. It's a lot of people from Senegal, Nigeria, Cameroon, and places in Africa. He was like, yo, son, I'm going to tell you, these niggas be wilding. They be outside wilding, sitting around. They got money in their pocket. They snatching phones. They doing a whole bunch of wild and wicked on the buses, the trains, on the blocks, and all this other shit. So while I am sympathetic to the people who needed to dip out because their situation was not good, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to like the shit that's actually really happening, that some of these people are coming here wilding out. Like some of them, like that gruesome case in Long Island, in Queens, in the park where the homeboy raped the girl, told her stop, and then continued and killed her. Like, and his attitude was like, I just felt like it. So at the same time, we can't make it all seem like it's all just a hard struggle, story for every person that's here. There's people who are here also taking advantage of what is being given.
Right. And but I want to push back on you, Chris, a little bit in saying it's slightly, like I definitely hear what you're saying in that, but I think it goes along with what Marcus was saying before. It's like, who are you more mad at? You're going to be mad at the immigrant who is coming in, and it's not necessarily their fault that they're getting all these things. Like, or are you going to get mad at the politicians who are making that the way that it is on off your back?
You can do
No,
obviously for
I'm saying, but yes, I do feel there has to be both. But I think what I'm saying is, I think one kind of takes precedence over the other. I believe, because I kind of see that in terms of even with me, at times being an immigrant, like look, I came here by way of my mom who married my stepfather who's here, whatever, but there's always kind of like the issue with me as the Black immigrant, basically. And actually, I made kind of like a joke, like on Twitter, like a few weeks ago, basically being, like, where both Biden and Trump were basically like black jobs or whatever. Like, and I was just kind of like, well, I'm black, but you can make the argument that I took a black job, like, do I kind of count in that? Like, like I said that kind of tongue in cheek, but, but kind of not. But I say that because you have a problem with politicians who are kind of allowing this to happen, but you're still voting for them anyway, kind of going what you were going into before. Like, you can't, well, I would argue many of those people may not vote at all, like, but many will, because they're not necessarily connecting with that experience, or they're maybe too far removed from that reality that they don't think about it. But I feel like, to me, it's easier to blame, like, oh,
but let me
hold on, let me finish.
let me jump in. Let me jump in real quick, right? Sure. The communities I'm talking about, right, are like Jamaica, Cambria Heights, Astoria. These are places in Queens, right?
Right.
Just a few places to name a few, right? These are communities that are already heavy with migrants, or immigrants who've been there decades. You know what I'm saying? And even those people who have been there for decades, from the 50s and 60s, it is them saying, yo, hold on, wait a second. What the fuck is going on here? This is not only a purely Black American and or white American people saying this. You know what I'm saying? These are people from the Caribbean who live in these communities. Like, yo, hold on. What we got here? You putting people in our neighborhood, 1,000 men in this facility right here. People don't feel safe in the community. So these are very real things, right? And while we can address the issue with the government to allow, with the government that has clearly, this is a program. This is not by mistake, right? This is, clearly supposed to be happening this way. So you can be mad at the system for allowing it, but when said people, and it's only a portion, I'm not saying all or even 50%, but again, if you live in that situation, something violent or something unfortunate happens and it comes from that particular group of people, you are now going to feel and look away at that particular group of people. It's just nature. It's just how anybody would do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
no, I totally get that. And I definitely appreciate you saying that. But
hold on 1 second. Hold that thought. I'm just throw this in there real quick for just a little note for the audience. For those who might not have caught Sabby's panel, some of the topics that we're talking about here kind of are overlapping. So this show is kind of weave in and out of that, and you're gonna get our take. So if you're looking for, well, where are they going to talk about the Sabby's panel stuff? Part of this is part of it, because the topics that were that were spoken about were the economy, immigration, reparations, foreign policy, and policing. Those were the main topics that were brought up. So as you see with Collin and Chris, and what you'll see some of my comments, all of those things are going to be interwoven together. Immigration is affecting the economy, is affecting policing, is affecting foreign policy. So we're talking about them kind of it's kind of more organic how this is going, but this is kind of our takes on some of the topics that were brought up during Sabby's panel. But go on ahead, Collin.
Okay, so appreciate you saying that, Chris, but evil still kind of what my point was still applies. It's the idea of like, okay, you're upset, and rightly so, to be upset of what's happening in terms of immigrants coming in and getting more amenities than people who have lived there forever in neighborhoods forever, right? But it's still the idea of like, so the key is, I think the word that we're kind of looking for is accountability. So I think it's the idea of like, who are we trying to keep accountable? Is it the immigrants who are coming in, or is it the people in power that are not, I wouldn't say turning a blind eye, or like the bureaucracy of the system that is allowing this to happen at our expense? And I think when it comes to voting, like, this is where I think in one case you have to kind of speak up and be like, look, we understand, but we don't particularly like what's happening to us. We kind of understand what's happening to these immigrants while they're coming here, but they shouldn't be coming here off our tax dollars in order for them to essentially have better lives that we pay taxes in, and we do not get the same amenities. Like, what's up with that? I think, not to say I don't hear those kind of discussions, but I think especially among these communities, I think we're so disconnected from politics generally that we do not make these issues known and loud. So, so it's just going to continue.
Well, that's what goes into the low information voter, like we talked about earlier. If you're a low information voter, though your frustrations on something that's going on might be valid, you're directing your focus and energy at the wrong person. You need to figure out who is the one who is setting up this legislation. So all of this money is going.
I told you, if they really wanted to deal with the immigration problem, they would just deem everybody Haitians, and therefore they would not allow anybody in, because that seems to be the only group that they for sure will catch them in water, on land, in air, and they will turn them around and send them right back immediately. There is no pausing. There's no stopping. There's no checking for babies or pregnant women or sick people. No, they can just go right back. That is what happens. I hate, I'm not picking on my Haitian people. I fucks with my Haitian people. However, I'm just saying the American behavior towards them is very much like, nah, anybody but you guys. It's messed up, but it almost seems that that's how they have to deem them for them to not let them in. To Collin's point about the government, you can try to vote, you can try to support candidates. You can even spend some money, I guess, on some type of campaign. But when my neighborhood is facing whatever it's facing currently, I have to deal with that before I could even deal with the person who's opening the door. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of deal with both at the same time.
But this is where I will push back at that. That seems like that would be the logical approach, to deal with the person in your neighborhood. But that's actually a situation that you can't deal with. You can't do anything about that situation. You can't do anything about them there. You can't do anything about how much money they're getting by being frustrated with them. You got to find out who has allowed these funds to get into their hands. Okay. It's like the same thing that was going on before they had this so-called migrant crisis. What's been going on for years, where there's certain tax revenue and benefits that immigrant populations were allowed to have coming in that citizens were not getting. That's not a new thing. It's just been exacerbated because of the influx of immigrants into certain areas.
You know what? Speaking of this, did you see? I never thought I would see this. Did you see in Ireland yesterday that the Protestants and the Catholics were marching together? Did you see that shit?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
You know they got beef. Like, what's that American family, the McCoy and the Hatfields? Like they got beef for real, son. This like, you know, they were marching in the street together in Belfast, I think it was, over immigration because I believe they're bringing migrants to Ireland too. So they got like two mortal enemies to like say like, yo, dog, we're gonna stop the beef for today, and we're gonna look at this issue. So we have everything we said. At the same time, we still have to deal with reality. We
Right.
But
can
I
deal with
Yeah.
but like I go back to
people are
again.
just going to
They
react
can
whether we like it or not, right?
they can
And
they can
whether we
march.
call them low information or high information, people are still going to react how they're going to react in
Yeah,
those moments.
but it still goes back to my point. All it's doing is okay, they're reacting and they're having frustration and anger. And typically all that leads to if you're not going into dealing with it on a political level, violence or something like that. But that's not going to fix the problem. That's not going to stop the problem either. All it's going to do is
right.
going to lead. And so if you want to actually deal with the problem, you got to deal with
The root.
with the root of the problem instead of trying to address the symptoms.
Right.
And
you know,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
right. And I don't want to make it seem like it's just people of color that's an issue. Remember, like the issue with Ukraine, like we had Ukrainian immigrants, and I would argue in certain ways they were getting more perks than even some of these immigrants of color. Like they were getting like, from what I understand, I think there was a story that they were getting acceptance into like HBCUs and all that kind of some Ukrainians who were coming here from the war, and we were kind of like, what? Like, why they're coming in for free or low cost, and like, you know, black people who are living here, well, black people generally who are living here or going to these HBCUs may not get like some of the financial aid or scholarships that some of these Ukrainian refugees were getting. So I don't want to make that mistake that I think we kind of make the association of like, I want to be very careful. Like when we think of immigrants, we're thinking of people of color. No, it's can be white immigrants as well. That is also an issue. But going with what Marcus is saying, it's like, and I think in kind of what we're kind of talking about is the idea of like, you immigrant, you're getting this shit and that's bullshit. And like, I don't get it. It's just like a lot of finger pointing at each other and a lot of strife and chaos among each other, while the politicians are just kind of sitting back and just watching us and laughing. So it's like, who should we really be mad at? Mm-hmm. Should we be mad at the immigrants who really have no control over the situation? And like, and I get the resentment, truly, I do. Like, because I even experienced that, as I said in my last example. But it's the idea of like, what's the bureaucracy around that, or what's the politics around that that is allowing this to happen? That's where we need to draw our energy to. And again, it's kind of like, if you're going to vote for, well, I'll just say this and I'll be done. If you're going to vote for Kamala, for example, and she's going to allow this shit to continue, like, and if you live in those neighborhoods, why? Like, what are you demanding, or what are you trying to get from her in order, you know, in order for her to change that idea?
You see, that's what they've been. So, you know, particularly people of color in the larger cities, whether it's New York, specifically Philadelphia, New York, and California. Who was the last one? No. It was Chicago, Philly, New York. Particularly black residents I've seen, you know, taking this to their council people, to their local representatives, right? I've seen them going there, and especially out of New York, the response was that, oh, these people are being xenophobic.
I get that.
And it's like that's the wrong. And again, so whenever you say like, well, who should we take it out on? They're
I'm
going
not.
to the
I'm not. I'm not
they're going
saying
to the right
take it.
people. They're
Right.
going
Actually,
to the right people, and they're telling them, "Hey, you need to do something about this, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Governor, Mrs. City Council, Mrs. State Rep, etc. You need to do something about this." They're approaching them. Clearly, the situations have not changed. So on the ground, the attitude is just going to get worse. So whether you agree with people's reactions to it or not, that's just what it's
well,
going to be.
well,
Right. But
well,
just because
what
if
I'm
you
saying is,
yeah.
let me
Well,
get
just
this.
because people saying you are xenophobic doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't do it.
Mhm.
Like, if they're gonna call me xenophobic, fuck off. Like, we have people who are now saying, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic," and all this other bullshit for your stance against, like, seemingly being against Israel. I'm like, fuck off. No, it's not about me being anti-Semitic at all. It's the idea of, like, I just don't like the Zionist ideology or whatever. Like, I'll make that there, and I think yes, and I'll say something, Chris. I think ultimately, like, you said something that I think is very pertinent, especially dealing in, like, a lot of these major cities. Like, you really should be looking at your local community governments
Well,
first in terms of making your case known.
this is where I would push back even more than that. This isn't something that the city councilman came up with. This isn't something. This is stuff that comes even above them. This
Right.
is stuff a lot of time that goes all the way up to your governor and your state, not your state representative, but your senators in Congress and your Congress representatives. This is a lot of this stuff isn't even a state level stuff. That's the reason why I say we got to get a better understanding of politics and how this actually works, because you're going to your city council person or your state rep person, but actually the person is your person who's in Washington, D.C., which many of them don't even know who that is. And you're going to take out all this frustration at city council while and vote them out, and good, you probably should vote them out. But you're more than likely they're still going to show up in November and vote blue all the way down the line or red all the way down the line, and putting some of these same people back in office who are the ones who actually are responsible for this. And that's what I'm saying. Another thing is, even if they are going, you're not going to get an instant return on anything. You're not going to go for a year, 2 years, and all of a sudden these things are going to be fixed, because a lot of these are laws that were put into place over years. It's the same thing if you look at the whole gay marriage thing. In order for them to get the whole gay marriage thing, they've been fighting for that for like 20, 30, 40 years. None of these things that you push for are going to have an instant turnaround on. So it's going to take a concerted effort continuously at the right levers of power to actually affect any kind of change if you're going to try to affect the change.
Right.
I mean, you can't get worried about the frustration. And all what's going to happen is, if people did decide that they want to take it out and get angry, all you're going to do is fight. All you're going to do is turn into a war, which now you're involving police. And how are the police going to react to our communities? Are they going to be backing us? No. So you're putting yourself in a bad situation either way by not actually going to the right people and not having the patience to stay on them to affect the change that you want.
I will say this, Marcus, real quick. I definitely do agree, and I've seen this in terms of policing, especially.
So what happens is the pendulum then swings in the other way, because just like anything else, you would think, okay, if I'm talking to the mayor has to meet with state reps, who has to meet with the governor, who has to meet with the senator and the other members of Congress, who will then meet with maybe our national party. So the word is going from local all the way up. Y'all don't get my ass kicked here in town. I'm gonna need y'all to chill, do something, have a party, bring Meg Thee Stallion in, anything y'all gotta do. You know what I mean? But they're not doing anything. So whenever the shit goes bad on the ground, you have to assume that this is what they wanted to happen.
Well,
I don't know if I see it that way, because I don't look
how
at
do you
it
get
as,
to your rep in DC?
but like your city council,
at least,
but like
the person
what
in the city.
But it doesn't work as in like like it's this rank level like that. I mean, you got to figure out who is the person who put this law into effect. Figure out who is the person who did this. And a lot of people are just fishing in the dark, yelling at everybody. You got to figure out who is the person who set this legislation up and how do we get this overturned, or how do we get somebody in there who is going to put legislation in there to change said thing. You can do all the bitching you want to the governor, to the politicians, and governor don't got to answer his phone.
Right.
The same thing with the mayor. If you're not getting the mayor and you're not constantly in the mayor's face, him getting phone calls from city councilmen does nothing.
No.
It has to be that mayor or governor has to feel the pressure to feel they need to do something different. They need to feel like their job is at risk. That's the only way you get people to do any. That's the way you affect change from any of these people. They have to feel like, damn, I could lose my job, I can lose my seat, I can lose my perks. The same with the representatives. They can hear from their people back in the state all they want, that they're getting their ass kicked. They don't give a shit, because they're a lot of times getting most of their money nationally anyway, or getting it from the DCCC or the DNC. So what a couple of people in the community are bitching about doesn't really matter to them. And even if they do decide it gets bad on the grounds, they don't care about that either. That's not going to matter to them. They don't live in those communities.
Right. Just going off what you were saying, Marcus, I say start on the local level first, because that's where you have the most direct impact. Because some of the higher level representatives in government, they can choose not to listen to you. Like a councilman, for the most part, they may not do what you want them to do, but they have to sit there and listen to you. And I know that because that's what I do for my teacher advocacy group all the time. Some of them don't like my ass at this point, but like they have to listen to me whenever I go in and do I kind of do testimonies and all that. They have to sit there for like 3 minutes and listen to me bitch off about an issue or whatever. At least they have to appear like they're interested. So, but you're right in terms of, Marcus, in terms of the idea, and I've seen this in terms of the police, how Biden, for example, has funded the police more, has resulted in our mayor, Bowser, giving more money to our police, local police here. So, so not to say you have to kind of come at it at all ends, but the way that you get the most, I'll say this in this way, you're able to get things faster if you start with the local government first, primarily, and then
depending on what it is,
but you have the most direct impact with your councilman. And I would argue like most people will know who the president is, and like maybe their governor or like council and senator, maybe on the state level, but they don't know who the councilmen are. So, and I think even in that's a problem. Like, you should be talking to the people who have the most direct impact as far as what's happening in your town or city. That's who you should go to first in terms of trying to get your needs met. And then if they're not doing their job, and you should kind of go all the way up to the top anyhow, and basically being like, well, if you're not going to do what we're going to say, but if you're not going to do what we say, then hell, we're not going to, there's no reason for me to vote for you in the next election when you're coming to demand your vote.
And Collin, that's what I'm saying. So now in these communities, whenever you see more black people talking about I'm fucking with Trump now as a result, at least if they become single issue voters on this particular issue, you know, at least some people, when they do, there should just be no need to examine or study long about why they did that, right? Because somebody's like, yo, I'm going to try to stop this shit. I'm going to shut this down. Whether or not he can or not, but at the very least, speaking to that for people who are complaining about it, that matters.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what we're saying. That should be consequences.
Right.
You don't want to do what we're asking you to do. You don't want to try to fix this thing that we're saying is a problem. Then okay,
Go hold
then
that-
count on over here. He about to get our votes, and we're gonna start pushing y'all
Right.
out of power. And that's how that has to work. I mean, and that's what I'm saying in particular. But I feel even more so, you gotta find out who is the person who are writing these laws. There are laws that are being written for them to get that. The mayor's just not showing up one day saying, you know what, I'm gonna put 5,000 towards every undocumented person who comes in here. There's laws that are on the books.
The federal government is saying, hey, take it, we'll pay you. That's it. And
right.
then
But then you're right. And then what you can do, like, because it's all these local politicians who are giving that money to them. So it's just kind of like, hey, what's up? Like, call them out on that. And then either one or two things can happen is they can just flip you the bird, or if you friend their power, then they have to kind of think twice and be like, and that's when they might go to the higher ups and say, I'm not sure if I can do this or whatever. But all that to say is that doesn't mean and I think part of the problem is we don't I think we can be a lot more nuanced in terms of not being just a single voter, like generally, but even if it's just the one issue that you care about, like ultimately, if it's your mayor or council people who are essentially getting the checks from higher up in order to put in these programs that you disagree about, then they should be the first ones that you organize around. And then, but I think the problem is we don't tend to do that. I think just generally, because we don't often make the association of what happens locally more so directly affects what is going to happen in my life. That's why I'm kind of like, I don't necessarily.
To me, that sounds good, better than it works, because let's just say, you have a local movement, somebody comes up and he's got a couple of charges. They put that up and everybody's like, oh yeah, this person ain't shit. But meanwhile, he or she had an actual plan and was trying to organize. But, because we seen some shit in a jacket that we didn't like, now we're just like, okay. So it's like, that sounds good on the local level, but that's why on some level you need to take care of local first, right? And hope that you can gain control there and then start making changes on that plateau. To go any higher is to lift too much and you're not that strong, right?
It's not, no, but it's like, but you start locally, and especially if you get results, then, and I'm saying this in the best case scenario, that gets noticed. And then other states might say, oh, how did you manage to get this? And that's when it starts. That's like the theory behind it. It's like, if you do something good or positive for the community that actually works, and you kind of maintain that, that's going to get noticed. And then other people are going to come in and be like, well, what did you do in order to do this? And the X, Y, and Z. And that's typically, or should be, that's how those ideas kind of spread. I think the problem is we tend to be like, Kamala, do this. That's generally our first tutu, or Biden, do this, or Trump, do this, when they don't give a fuck of what's going on in your city or town. And it makes sense because they get the most visibility. But if you do not know who your councilmen are, and the councilmen you should know because they're the ones who control the budget in your state. So you should have a vested investment. You should be knowledgeable about where your local tax dollars is going towards your community and what is funded or what is not being funded. Because what is not being funded or what might be funded more will affect you. As I said, and that I feel personally, because my mayor funded the police, but teachers are getting cut from schools in my city. So obviously for me, I'm fine, especially my job, but for my other colleagues who work in the district may not be. So that's an issue now that when I go back to work within the next couple of weeks, especially in terms of my advocacy, that's something I'm going to have to address, among other things. But but I think part of the problem is we're so disconnected from politics across the board because we kind of see how on the federal level they're not doing shit for us. So I think our tendency is like, well, we're just out, like, because we're just kind of seeing like they're not going to do anything for us anyway, so why bother? And I think and I think that's where the politicians win. And yeah, like the work that you do on the ground, yeah, like it may take years to even get a sliver of a crumb. But I'm saying all of that is the idea of like, that doesn't mean the work should not be done. And I think really it's the idea of like, especially within the Black community, we need to re-engage ourselves with what's going on locally, statewide, on the federal level, and start being able look like that, like with the civil rights movement. That's like we need to walk in that spirit again, in terms of, you know, how churches were essentially like local organizing places that they were able to organize locally to where they were able to form a network of being able to kind of start organizing like on a state and federal level. Like we need to get back to that spirit in terms of how to organize effectively so that we're able to see changes that we want to see. But all I'm saying is I think the argument is we're punching at each other and hurting each other and not the people at the top that really are the cause of the problem. And they're just kind of sitting back and watching us and laughing because it's like, well, we can get away with getting away with this shit because they're not seeing that we're the cause of it and they're fighting each other. Like, I would rather take the stance of fighting the people above me than my neighbor, so to speak. Yeah. And that's just kind of the stance I take generally. And I wish that more people would kind of take that stance, because me finding someone who might get more benefit or whatever isn't going to help me in the end, especially as Marcus said, like if there's more crime or whatever, then they're going to get the police involved, and that's not going to be good for us.
Yeah, so I wanted to throw in this because this kind of goes into what I was saying, what Jared put. Exactly, Collin. Local organizing is important. You can get in good with local politicians, and what I mean by organizing is not just getting people together. There needs to be a better understanding and knowledge of what is going on and who to deal with and who, because it's just like Bernie Sanders runs around and screaming. He used to scream millionaires and billionaires all the time. Yeah, but you're not naming which billionaires are doing what, which millionaires, which companies, so that you can actually put a focus on going after that. You're just saying it vaguely. Go after the politicians. Go after this. We need to find out if it's Councilman Jackson is the one who has shepherded this bill, and well, Congress people don't do bills, but you get state representative Jackson, who's the one who put this bill in to get X done. Then pressure need to be put on her head on why is this, instead of just going at any random person that we can find. The pressure needs to be directed in the right area. It's like it says, 5 pounds can break 5 pounds of pressure can break a bone if it's applied properly. And the thing is, we're organizing just getting numbers, but you get in those numbers, how effective is it if the rest of the people in that area still vote for all those people, and you don't reach or get the knowledge to the proper people to affect the change you need? This like you were talking about your Mayor Bowser. Yeah, if people start, okay, now we're gonna start busting some heads because we're tired of this shit. Oh, right. Well, cops are just gonna come in and bust your heads. Yeah. It's not gonna mean anything to them because they're still gonna make money off of locking your black ass up. So in the end, okay, do it. But another thing is, in my area, like living out here in Cali is so freaking corrupt that it's almost a lost cause even trying to press all it, because all the way down to the city council level is corrupt, because all of these people are trying to get themselves in the pipeline to become national representatives for the Democratic Party. They're trying to become, the next senator from California or the next representative, and they're all with the mindset of working their way up like that. And most of them are like, we just had the mayor of San Francisco got tied up in this whole thing with the FBI probe about, cozying up to different businesses and bundling donations and all that. And when there's so much money to be made in certain areas, it can be more of a lost cause in other areas. I'm not saying that you should give up on it because of that, but it needs to be a concerted effort in the right direction on the right things. And it can't be, well, we tried and we didn't get anything, because that's where I feel like a lot of people are missing it. The whole, a lot of this legalizing of marijuana happened because states like California said that we're going to go against the grain. And then other states started to get into that. Then it started to become something that was spread. Gay marriage is another thing. California decided they're going to push that, and then it started getting pushed to other states. The biggest thing is you got to get the movement, the ball rolling in your area to get your area rolling, and then that can affect the rest of the country and the rest of the states. And it could overturn some of the corruption and kind of like how things are set in concrete in certain areas if other areas get it done first.
Right. And honestly, I think in this generation, we're kind of at a disadvantage of knowing how to do that, because like probably our parents' generation used to do this all the time. Again, going back to the civil rights movement. And this is the kind of stuff, and it's kind of funny when it's like, I feel now people are trying to reinvent the idea of organizing and protesting and all that kind of stuff. They're trying to remix what's been done. I'm like, you don't necessarily have to do that. Do you even know what Malcolm X did, or what MLK, or what the Black Panthers did back in the day? Maybe just study them and figure out what they did. And yeah, you might have to remix it in terms of, doing what they did and kind of making it more palatable in terms of what we're doing now. But we're trying to do all this organizing and trying to create something new when we have essentially the framework of what has been done, especially within the Black community, over centuries. So it's just kind of like, so I think that education needs to be there, but I think also just to know of how to get it done and how to be persistent when it doesn't happen right away. And I think that's the kind of thing that I think just across the board as Black people within the diaspora that I would love us to return to, especially for like, you can fill in the blank of whatever issue it is that affects Black people, But I think, again, we tend to be not necessarily no fault of our own, but I think we've just been so disenchanted. And I see this all the time. People are just so disenchanted with politics. I think as far as what happens on the federal level, they don't often think about what happens on the local level usually at all. And they're disengaged. They don't care. And I would argue that's the worst place for people to be in, because they don't realize the power that they have in terms of, once you know a little bit of something, especially what happens locally, that if you see some shit locally, then it's kind of like, oh, I don't like that. I want to fight. I have the means to fight against that. Like, people don't think that way. And I think we definitely have to kind of return to that and do what you can. And so, like, as Marcus said, the idea is, if you're able to get a win in one city or one state, then hopefully that idea will be able to spread in other states, which ultimately will affect federal policy. But the work has to be done regardless. And that's kind of my argument, is that, yeah, it's kind of easy to tap out when things don't go your way, but it's kind of like the idea of like right now I'm trying to lose some weight. Like right now, that's been an issue for me. Mm-hmm. But trying to do all the right things, and like, if anything, I'm gaining weight or whatever else. But it's like, you have 1 or 2 out, you can just quit and have it be worse off for you, or really try and figure out what's going on and try to tweak what you're doing differently, or try and do what you need to do in order to keep going. But it's necessary to do. So yeah, I think
Well,
that.
Colin, I would go back to also we spent a lot of time focusing on like the domestic,
Mhm.
but even if you, let's say for instance you're able to get in there, you get the politicians to stop sending this money or whatever, is it going to stop the illegal immigration? Is it going to stop the amount of numbers who are still going to keep coming in? No. You're still
No.
going to be dealing with that situation. You're still going to be dealing with some of these same problems. Unless you can, and that's the reason why I say you got to find out who are the people who are responsible for a lot of these things. Who are the people who are deciding, hey, we need to keep going into all these countries? Now that's speaking as if, and I got to put this out there, the disclaimer. Shout out to you, Gregory. This disclaimer that you feel that this can be fixed through the electoral box. If you
Right.
believe that, then you
Okay.
got to also can't focus on necessarily the immigration side of it. You got to focus on um, going into all these countries, the
Right.
foreign policy side. If you don't deal with the situation that is leading people to pick up everything and come to this country, you're never going to stop that because, like I heard Dana talking about on the panel. I just want them to build a wall. Well, you
Right.
know how many people come into this country through flying in and just staying? A big chunk of them. You know how much a border patrol agent gets paid? You think a border patrol agent can't get paid to smuggle people across the border or to let a truck fly through? You think that there's not tunnels that people can come through, human trafficking tunnels? There are so many ways to come into America than that you think a border is going to stop.
Right.
I mean, person can fly to Canada and come straight across. A person could fly to Canada. I mean, literally walk straight across. A person can go through the Great Lakes. They can come across. A person could go down the northern west coast where it's virtually not even, I mean, protected or guarded on the Washington, Oregon areas. There's so many ways to come into this country
Right.
that a border wall isn't going to stop anything.
Right. I think part of the problem too, I think especially in this country, just with my think, is that we tend to look at reformist solutions in terms of what I mean by reformist is, let's say your foundation of your house is shot, but instead of fixing the foundation so that your house is more secure, you replace the windows. Like, that's not getting to the root of the problem. And this is the kind of stuff that on both parties, like, they do this all the time. They trick us into thinking, oh, we just need to replace the windows and patch up the floor and like as a distraction to us to be like, oh, that sounds cool, but not necessarily getting to the root of the issue in terms of what is really going on, that we can prevent this from happening again so that we don't have to deal with this issue ever again, or at least for a while. And I think about that kind of stuff all the time in the nature of my job in terms of teaching kids. It's like, especially if there's an issue. But I don't think we always think about that in terms of our politics and being like, what's the root cause of why this is a problem? And I think we tend to think about a quick fix, like as usually a solution, rather than like the idea of like, what can we do? And I'll argue it's a lot harder to think about, but like, what can we do so this issue doesn't happen ever again? And we need to get into that mindset. And that's what justice is the idea of like, how can we fix our systems so that the people that benefit in the right way, essentially. Like, we don't tend to think in those terms. We just tend to think of, oh, just giving more money to kind of solve the problem, or like maybe a Democrat might, oh, we just give you more money for socialist programs, or like for Republicans, it's like, oh, we don't want to give you any money at all, or whatever. And it's like, well, what systems can we change up so that we don't necessarily have to give socialists, like, we don't have to give people an extra money in welfare and all that kind of stuff. How about I'll use housing example. Like, we talk about affordable housing, right? How about, why don't we just guarantee housing for everybody? Like, regardless of income. Like, those are the things that I think we kind of need to switch up generally in when we talk about politics, at least getting to the main prize of things so that we have something that I think is a lot more worthwhile to fight towards. Because I think we always kind of think of these reformist things and just work bit by bit by bit. And then when we get that reformist thing, it's like, oh, we're done and we'll just go home. And it's like, no, like, always start with the grand prize first. Like, what is the thing that will be the most beneficial to people? And then go from there. And then make that case in terms of, like, and I don't think we do a good job at all in terms of fighting for the very thing ultimately that will be the most beneficial for people. What are what is truly justice in our country, in our world, in terms of making sure that everyone's needs are met? Yeah, as I said, we don't think in that way usually at all. We always just think like, quick fix, this quick reform, and like, we're satisfied with that when we should be demanding more.
Yeah. I mean, I also kind of want to throw into this conversation, want to mix in economy. Um, our views on how all of this affects the economy. And then, of course, I think that for the most part, we're probably all in agreement on policing. Um, but economically, this is why it's such a complex issue. I feel we can look down at at the ground level and see the problems and the conflicts that this situation is pushing against through community versus community, immigrants versus undocumented, people who are citizens who support it, who are pushing back, and we see all that. And also, some areas are dealing with worse issues. Some areas is worse than other areas. I mean, for instance, in California, for instance, LA, there's so many of the Hispanic population who are citizens that you wouldn't know who's a citizen, who's not a citizen. So it's not even the same type of issue that people are like. I'm hearing people talk about in New York and New Jersey and Chicago. It's not close to the same situation. So you're not getting near the outrage or frustrations that we're hearing. Now, you've had people for many years out here, particularly the black community, talked about how they feel that they've been pushed out. That's been something that's always been going on. But there's always been the gentrification and all of those different things going on forever. So as far as the economy, how do you deal with the fact of and bringing Venezuela back into the conversation, that our government is intentionally, uh, throwing poison in the well on certain things to try to affect chaos in a situation, through sanctions. When you do sanctions, you're trying to make the local government unpopular. You're trying to make people rise up against the government. And that's the same thing which happens in all of these countries which sanctions are thrown upon. You it's just like throwing, it's just like in tennis, sometimes hitting a certain slice serve. A lot of times how you hit that, the person where it's coming to them, they have no clue how that ball is going to bounce. And it's the same thing in those situations. Sometimes you have people who are just outright ticked off of the government. Sometimes people put that energy back on the country who put the sanctions on. Sometimes that breeds more corruptions inside. So it's so many issues that it generates through, these different sanctions. And you have people who were on the ground level, people are frustrated and pissed off about these things in America and in these other countries. And you have people who are trying to benefit off of these things within our country at the same time. So whereas it might be hurting a local economy, it might be a private sector economy which is massively benefiting off of this. So how do you reconcile in your thoughts on this, Chris? What are you thinking?
I mean, it's yet to be seen. You know, you're talking about the economy as it relates to all the people who are coming to the States now, right?
Yeah, I'm saying like, well, how does this like the economy in general? Because um the
I mean,
conversation
you'll
which
have
was well
so on
it,
the on the base level, right? You'll have people willing to do work for the least amount of pay, right?
mhm.
So obviously that on, you know, as you start from the basement, you work your way up, you know, it'll start to have its effects. So, you know, it's, I won't say free labor, just real low cost labor you'll have. But if they become, but if they are fast tracked to become citizens, then, you know, it may change differently because then once they're citizens, obviously there's certain things that you can't get away with citizens that you can get away with undocumented people. So that'll be something to watch for and make a distinction about. Um, also, um,
I would say
it,
yes and no because if you have a higher influx of a workforce, you got more people to choose from, and so it still keeps the wages low. But
yeah, of
back to
course. I mean, that's going to happen anyway. So does that then turn into a discussion about universal basic income down the line? Is that the final thing that is that the final straw that will make it happen, just to calm people down as well? Because, you know, as we deal with the economy, we have to talk about automation, right? We just can't talk about the
Mhm.
human aspect of working because less and less humans will be required going forward. They're just fast food. Who was it? I think Taco Bell just said they're going to make their drive-through. They're going to be using more artificial intelligence with their drive-through, so that'll be
Mhm.
one less person that you need inside the facility to serve customers. So when we talk about that, I mean the wages will go down, prices and costs will continue to increase, especially as the demand in cities for places to live. So the economy is going to, in certain places, going to go through changes that it's going to be a lot of new. It's going to be a lot of new experiences. And again, that experience is not only going to, it's not going to affect every community the same.
So what you don't believe that Kamala or Trump is about to like really like boom this economy?
Well, if
Say it ain't
Trump comes
so,
in,
Chris.
if Trump comes in and the Republicans do their usual cutting of regulations and trying to, you know, make for tax breaks for businesses, yeah, we'll start to see some movement in the economy for sure. He can't do anything about the interest rates. He can't do anything about inflation, despite his rhetoric, because we all know the Federal Reserve is, you know, basically who dictates monetary policy. So, you know, we're at their, you know, we're waiting to see what they do with their money and their interest rates.
Hmm. Oh, Colin, your thoughts?
Um, Here's the thing, because I could see it from Chris. I definitely hear it from Chris' side, but I think this might be the problem, at least in the communities that I venture in frequently, like especially if you're more affluent. Like, and it's funny because I remember just before I went on summer break. Now, the thing is, at least with a lot of my colleagues at my school, they are very well traveled generally, and they kind of know the world a little bit. They were having discussions, or at least a discussion was being had about healthcare in other countries, like in terms of how, in general, especially in a lot of other
Hey,
developed
fellas, I'll
countries,
be right back.
sure, in terms of other countries, how generally, depending on the situation, people are more or less covered, and they made the argument like, oh, like our health system here is shit. Like of what we have to pay in order to get for the amount that we get. But I feel like because they're a lot more affluent, that's not to say they aren't concerned about it. But I think in general, I think in their mind, they're able to be like, we can make do with what we have given, like our income or whatever, versus if you are low income, you don't have the opportunity to necessarily say that. So I think I definitely agree with you in terms of, like how automation is going to become more of a reality. I think we're already beginning to see that. The need, an increased need for resources, like natural resources, like, again, if you look at what's happening in terms of Africa, Latin America, and in the Middle East, all of that kind of comes into play, especially our interest in those regions of the world in particular, given, the natural resources that do exist in those regions of the world, and that ultimately will help the West in terms of their financial gain. So it's all connected, but again, we don't think in terms of the larger, and it makes sense. We can't necessarily look at the larger picture when we're struggling from day to day trying to figure out how we're going to pay our own bills, right?
Mhm.
But it all connects with the idea of like what's happening to you on a micro level. There's something that's happening on the macro level that I think people need to be a little bit more curious and kind of think about this a little bit more. Is why is it that I'm not getting ahead? Or why is it that like I see these things happening at my expense where I'm losing my job and all this other kind of stuff? Like it often leads to something larger within what's happening globally that is kind of affecting your pocket. And I think we need to have more of those discussions, I think, generally in terms of economically, like what's happening around the world or what is not happening around the world ultimately will affect you.
Yeah.
And it's a bigger issue, larger than just you. So, but I think the key, as Marcus was saying before, we have to identify the people or the systems that are responsible for that, and kind of going from there versus, kind of seeing, and not to say this can't happen depending on the circumstance, but we often kind of go to our neighbors and being like, oh, they're better than me. Why are they doing this? They have this and I don't have that. Like, blah, blah, and like we just get into that kind of strife with each other. But then what is the systems that are in place that are kind of perpetuating those circumstances where certain people are able to get ahead and others are not?
Yeah, I would also throw in there some of the difficulties with this, and I remember hearing this years back. I think it might have been Tom Hartman that said this, probably easily like 15 years ago. He said, if you go into the minutes on a lot of these different meetings that they were having, going back into the 60s into the early 70s, they were like, part of the problem that we're having with the people is you got all of these people who are out in the streets. You got people fighting for black rights. You got the farm workers, which you had with the Cesar Chavez. And you had women's liberation, and you had all this stuff going on. People fighting against the Vietnam War. You had all of these different things going on, and they said, you know what? Part of the problem is these people obviously have way too much time on their hands to be able to focus on what the hell we got going on. So that's where it started to become this ratcheted up of a two income household and us being focused on the day to day more and more. And by being so focused on only, well, I just got to worry about the bills I got to pay. If you only have that mindset and you're not looking at the macro level, like Collin keeps bringing us back to, then you're staying in the day to day, week to week, and the system continues, and you're back to only fighting the symptoms of the problem versus dealing with the problem itself. I mean, if you got a cold, then you can't just keep on taking cough drops. I mean, you gotta go get yourself some rest, some vitamin C, all these things to get your immune system kind of working. You got to deal at some point. You have to. I know we can have a whole lot of stuff going on in our personal lives, but if there's not a concerted effort, and I'm not saying us as individuals have to be the one to try to take on this system, but and I look at it as there has to be somebody who's actually a brigade of people who are fighting it. There has to be a people who are seeing the problem, analyzing. There has to be somebody who's formulating the game plan. I mean, it's just like a team. You need players, you need a coach, you need a front office, you need recruitment, you need all of these different things to work towards that championship. And I feel a lot of people are looking at it as one thing or another. You got to have all of these different things. It's just like in a war. You don't win a war in the modern day with just the army. You need the army, you need the navy, you need the air force, you need ground troops, you need people flying over, you need people who are controlling runways into enemy lines. You got to have all of these different things built up to sustain that war effort and fight against it. And there needs to be an acknowledgement of what we're actually fighting, and everybody on the same page. And I feel like that's the only way you can actually get to even pushing any of these things back, excluding my own viewpoints on what I think things are going or how they're going, putting myself in the political mindset of looking at this from solely trying to solve it from a political means. This would have to be the first step, addressing the problem, educating each other on the problem, and then plotting a plan of attack against the problem.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. So again, it kind of goes upon what we spoke about earlier. It's the idea of understanding the root of the problem, figuring out a strategy of how you could solve the root, and gathering people who are able to fight in terms of, and that's not to say you're going to have losses along the way or you're going to have wins along the way too. But the idea is getting to the heart of the issue versus just talking around the issue, or just the way I kind of describe it, it's like, if there's a problem, I think the easiest thing to do is, or at least for our politicians, is just throw money at it, or try to, or not give money to it. I don't necessarily agree with either stance depending on the circumstances, but it's the idea of like, what is the best case? What is the best thing in this situation or policy that we need that would be beneficial to ideally everybody, but most people involved? And how do we get there? I think those are discussions that we need to be having first. And then once, as I said, once you identify the core issue, then you're able to attack it head on. But yeah, as I said, it's the idea like your your personal economics are often tied to what's happening in the world. And so, and I don't, and again, it's not easy for people to think of it in that way when you're struggling, but we have to think in terms of like the fact that you are able to maybe possibly buy maybe this t-shirt, for example, that I'm wearing right now. You don't know where this t-shirt came from. Like, you don't know, like, assuming if it came from China or wherever else, like, it might have been made at pennies, if that, of the dollar, in order for this to be made, in order to essentially have you dressed. So it's a larger issue that I think needs to be had in terms of economic equity, I think, in this country, but how it relates to what's happening in the world, that resources are being exploited in order for us to have the things that I wouldn't say want, but in a lot of ways what we need. I think we also need to have
Um,
a discussion.
I wanted to, well, another thing I was going to ask is because, Chris, you brought up how you think that like some of the things Trump will do might
I'll be right
kickstart
back.
the economy. I wonder how much the economy being downturn is unfairly being put on the Biden administration with the stuff that happened with COVID. Um, when you shut down the whole entire system, now that can be a whole different argument, which we won't go into at this point. But let's just say that whether it was Trump or Biden, it was going to get locked down and stay locked down as long as it was. Is it the lockdown that's actually more at fault for some of the economic issues and the inflation, or do you believe that we would have this economic problems and inflation regardless of if we had the lockdowns or not?
No, the lockdowns are what they did during COVID clearly had an effect, right? They stopped people's whole businesses. People, people went out of business as a result. You had people who were running their own business who are now employees somewhere else. They went from employers to employees in certain cases. So definitely, this has to do with the policies of COVID. Also, too, the printing of the $3 trillion in 2020, 2020, the printing of that money. I mean, at the time, 2021, you may not have felt it, but 2022, 23, where we are in 24, we can feel the result of them putting, $3 trillion into circulation. That's why we're dealing with inflation at the levels that we're dealing with. They can't bring down the interest rates on mortgages, for instance, because the inflation is still too high. Granted, the rates have been dropping, very minimally here and there. It's not 7.87. It's, in the sixes, but it's still relatively high. If you're dealing with, for instance, in the real estate market, you're dealing with a seller who has a mortgage and their rate is at, 2, 3, 4%. Good luck on trying to get them to move to take out more debt at 6, 7%. Why would you even do that? You know what I mean? So definitely what we're seeing is a result of the economic policies during COVID.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I hear some people try to make it as if, oh no, this is just the bad Democrat policies. Um, and I honestly wonder, like, actually, I'm gonna leave that one alone. I have a comment since my screen is frozen, of course. I have a comment start, and I was wondering if you could read that question, Chris, because I kind of want to hear your takes on it. It should be from Chamonique.
Guys, what do you think about the rumors that Trump is getting ready to dump JD Vance? He has buyer's remorse. Jason Black said that yesterday.
Yes, thoughts on that?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that Trump was actually considering it. I saw a mention of it on Twitter, but to the extent that he's going to get rid of JD Vance, I really think it matters very little. What other Zionists is he going to pick? Who knows?
Right, right.
But I mean, you see the same thing on the other side with Kamala. They mentioned this guy Shapiro, and I see a bunch of stupid takes from the likes of like what's that guy's name? Oh, it's funny, Crying Grim. Ryan Grimm. I think he said something to the effect like, yeah, by choosing Shapiro, who's like tied in with the IDF, that'll be the only way to, get Israel in line. I ain't never heard such stupid bullshit in my life. I mean, I have, but I'm just
He
saying
said
that.
what? Whoa! Rewind that. He said what?
He said something to the effect, and somebody could look it up on Twitter. Grimm said something to the effect of, if with Kamala picking Shapiro as vice president, that because of his connection to the IDF, that they can potentially get Israel to behave in a way that they would like for them to behave. Again, like I said, I've never heard
Wow.
more dumber shit spoken from somebody who's supposed to know better. But I resolved to just accepting that when it comes to the matter of Israel, Zionists, when it comes to that matter, people are just going to play stupid, act stupid, or they are stupid. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
it doesn't require nuance, and we keep having to add a whole bunch of nuance to it so as to not offend people, so you don't lose your job, so you aren't canceled, so you aren't kicked out of a community, what have you. We can be honest and have conversations and say what we want about anything. When it comes to them, we always have to like.
Well, I was gonna say, be careful
Oh,
already. For they're saying if you're
Yeah.
against Josh Shapiro, then that obviously shows that you're anti-Semitic.
anti-Semitic. Whatever.
Correct.
Even though J.V. Pritzker was in the running also, and people didn't have the same issues with him.
I mean, it's not to
It's
say
pathetic.
we can't have nuance, but when it comes to our leaders, especially with this issue, no, you don't. Like, it's all different degrees of Zionism that you're going to be dealing with, all of them in some way, shape, or form.
You heard his comments about the college protesters, right?
Yes, I have. And it's funny how he's saying when he made those comments that, oh, I was 20, I was young, I didn't know any better, but he won't offer, with the idea of alluding to that he changed, but he's kind of criticizing people now who essentially are fighting for the very thing that he allegedly has changed his mind on. So that's just a whole lot of bullshit to me. But like, as Chris was saying, they're all Zionists anyway, so it really doesn't matter who they pick. They're all going to be shills for Israel. They're all going to be shills for the industrial military complex. So it really doesn't matter who.
My biggest issue with him more than anything is I don't want to hear that fake fucking Obama voice for the next 4 years.
But right. But but to me, the larger issue is, and this was I'll say this: when Biden dropped out, for a little bit, I had this glimmer of hope of basically feeling like, oh, finally, people are starting to get the idea that electoralism in this country is bullshit, and people are going to drop it like a bad habit. Like, that's for at least I had the thought for like 2 seconds.
Come on,
Collin. And then like I had to have some hope or whatever. Jeez. Or at least, but then like once Kamala came in,
or as they call it, black pill, you need to come over to our side because we don't be buying into that stuff.
Right. But then once Kamala came in, everyone kind of got a second wind and basically being like,
the Kamala, the situation. Look, this is all I'd be really wanting to say. She has no support, none whatsoever.
No, but that's my point. It's like people are going to bat for Kamala, and I'm like, I'm confused. You are willing to drop Biden given his stance of Palestine. Kamala has not said any different from Biden towards her thing for Palestine, other than saying she wants a 6-week ceasefire. That's the most she said about it. And like,
she doesn't have to say anything. She puts her husband on the campaign trail to say it for her. So that's what happens. So she tries to pretend. Hubby keeps it real.
Right. So my take is, were you really pro-Palestine then? If you're willing to vote for Kamala, who will basically kind of prolong the situation that's happening there now? Like, so what? But was that really just an act for you? Because really, you should kind of come in with that same heat. Like, if you weren't willing to vote for Biden over his stance on Palestine and other issues, you shouldn't be voting for Kamala either. That's just kind of my take, but like I'm seeing many people online just basically being like, "Fuck, yeah, Kamala is great. I don't like that," and that's the gag. It's like, "Oh, I don't particularly like her, but she's our best shot of like all this other bullshit of like she's our best shot of voting against getting Trump and like all this other stuff." I'm like, then really, what you were saying, which kind of reminds me of like BLM George Floyd. Like, you all were for the idea of police brutality, like against Black people for like 2 seconds, and then once Biden came in, you just dropped it. So it just kind of shows how unserious a lot of these voters are in terms of the policies that they claim that they support or against. Because when the right person comes along, it's just like, okay, I don't need to bother about this anymore.
Well, I wanted to bring up something too, because that reminded me of something during the panel. During the panel, you were trying to bring up something, and somebody on the panel completely like misconstrued everything you said, because I knew exactly what you were saying when you said, well, a lot of the police training, going back to like the George Floyd stuff,
right,
is a lot of training that comes from the IDF. And the response from Dana was as if like, oh, the police treatment that we've gotten is that you're trying to say that the IDF somehow went back in time and taught the police officers everything. We're not saying, and I get, you weren't saying that. You were saying a lot of the tactics that they're using currently, though the mentality might have still been on the bullshit that they've been on, the tactics that are being used are coming from the IDF. Yeah. I just thought I was like, that's something that I wanted to address, because I noticed that, like, I was like, that's not what he was saying. I was so frustrated screaming at the screen while she's trying to misconstrue everything. It's like, y'all just hate the Jews. And I mean, and I'm like, well, no, you're not getting what's being said here in the nuance. We're talking about the IDF and the training in particular to police departments and the militarization.
Right. I don't want to call out Dana too much because, again, what I said to you guys off stream, like, I don't know her background. I don't know her situation. I don't know.
Well, I only had those 2 issues. I have that one and one other issue that I'm gonna bring up that she said, because like, since we've went at the Kamala people, I want us to have our pushback against the Trump people, and then also on that panel there was an RFK person. And so those are the 3 leading candidates right now. And so I figured I want to make sure that we lay out our viewpoint versus or for those people who represented those candidates, because I know I could definitely speak for me and Chris. We don't support any of them, and I'm pretty sure that you don't either.
No. Right, and that's the point in terms of, I think, what we were speaking about earlier. Like, this is why I think politicians don't take Black people especially seriously at all, because when it comes to issues, and like we were talking about immigration before, and like how Black people might feel away. Well, do you know of their policies? And that's what I've been screaming online regarding for Kamala. Like, what the fuck are your policies, woman? Like, on your website right now, all you have is a place where you can buy merch and for people to give. Like, but nothing in regards to what her now.
Yeah,
because you were able to put all that stuff up within 5 seconds.
Yeah,
but you can't put up a policy to kind of say where you stand or what, if it's the same as Biden's, or what you might do differently from Biden.
That was a pushback I had against the Kamala supporter who was on there, because
we lost him.
Marcus.
But
yeah, but I think I will try and finish what Marcus was saying. But the Kamala supporter, and honestly, I felt like he was trying to be like one of the, like the Harry Sisson types who was trying to go in without that nuance and just be like, Kamala, like that type of guy.
Yeah, like this is the person I support, and I don't see anything wrong, and that's that, and nothing you can say is gonna
And
sway
like
or make me
Trump
feel
bad
anything.
and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it's just like, look, I respect myself enough to have the understanding of, if you want my vote, I need to know what you stand for or what you're trying to bring to the table in order for me to justify me taking the time on November 5th to wait in line. I mean, I live in DC, so it probably won't be that long, for like 15, 20 minutes out of my day to bubble in that bubble next to your name to be our next president. I need to know what you plan to do for me, and especially for me as a Black man, what you want to do for our community. I'm not just going to go in blind and try and guess or hope that you will do it if I vote for you. And so it's just the idea of like, we tend to, and I think generally with voting, we tend to go in, as I keep saying, we tend to go in on vibes, like in terms of like, or we kind of put on the illusion of, oh, this person, just because they're in the Democratic Party or if they're in the Republican Party, that I can assume they are for this, and this. That's not necessarily the case, and I'll argue in most cases that they're not. But this is kind of where we kind of have to make the stand of like, what are you going to give us? Like, what do I get in exchange? And it's like, we don't do that for anything else in our lives. We don't, I hope not. We don't do that when we choose what we eat. We don't do that generally when we are in relationships with people. Like, we have a lot more vetting for those things, but not necessarily for the people who are going to lead us in our country. So it was the idea of like, yeah, I think you probably were able to tell, I guess my expressions from what I heard, my expressions on that that panel was speaking for me when I didn't speak a lot, but that guy, well,
Yeah, because you're gonna try to tell me, oh well, Kamala can get all this other stuff done, but
right.
she doesn't have her political ideas sussed out enough to be able to throw up a bullet points on the top issues on her website.
Well,
but she can ask for money though.
But it still doesn't. The conversation is still kind of pointless too, because regardless of whatever she says, depending on what the composition of Congress is, you know what I mean? No matter, she could have the best platform going, and if Congress is not aligned with that politically, then none of that is gonna. It doesn't matter what she has or.
Well, yeah, no, but I think at least at minimum humor us a bit.
Yeah, like, you gotta humor us. Like that's another bridge to get to. Like we'll get to that one at that point. But I mean, like you gotta at least give us like where you stand on something.
But I think
so
that
we can at
speaks
least
to the
know how
point
to
that you
define
guys. But that speaks to the point that you guys were making earlier about low information people, right? It's like, okay, well, I'll just go and support the candidate without making sure that there's a movement of like-minded lawmakers, not just politicians, but lawmakers who are for these things, right? And given that they never come in with an actual team who has an idea, then, it is what it is. I think of Project 2025, right? At least the Heritage Foundation has something that they put out there. You don't have to agree with that at all. Where is the other side with their Project 2025 or something similar? There is nothing. It's vote for us. They're bad. When they're talking to Black people, it's, oh, they're racist. If they're talking to a woman, they're sexist. If they're talking to an immigrant, it's, they're xenophobic. They're anti-immigrant. That's their only platform, is that they're not whatever racist, sexist, or xenophobic. You know what I mean?
Which that in itself is a damn lie, because many of them are exactly those things that may be more subtle with it, but they just are as bad,
correct.
if not maybe worse than Republicans are, who are probably more open with that.
Yeah.
Correct. They talk like this until they actually have to be in the community, and then they you'll see how they really feel.
Right. But honestly, yeah, you brought up a good point, Marcus, because really, for all intents and purposes, if you're a Black person in this country, that panel should have been all Team Couch, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because
that's my point.
Like, because, and, so the idea, and I think we've just so bought into the idea of you must vote. Like, your ancestors died for you in order for you to have this right to vote, which I get the sentiment, but what are you voting for?
That was more so what was his name? Lawrence, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one where he was like kind of backing up the Kamala supporter, but
Right.
he was like, I don't really agree, but if I got to do the vote blue no matter who, you could see him leaning into that. And that's my issue. Also, you jump to the and I told Chris, I said, I'll give him that. Each person they brought on, whether they were the Trump supporter, the FBA, whether they were the RFK, all of them did a good job, in my opinion, supporting for their cause. Yeah, okay, we'll get ready to speed this up a little bit, but I had two more issues on this, and then we'll get on to the Trump thing.
Sure.
Because Chris got to go in a little bit. The RFK guy, he frustrated me. He was really great on some stuff, but how he tried to he completely skipped over a bunch of stuff with RFK. He tried to make it like, oh, RFK is really pushing, because I'm gonna go into the reparation stuff right now. RFK, he doesn't he's not for reparations, but he has the best agenda that'll help, and I'm like,
well, here's the thing, and that's what we need to, and I think we don't do this a lot. We don't compare. It's the same thing. If you're shopping, you might go in different stores to try to figure out what fits you the best before you buy it. You're shopping. When you vote, this time we should be shopping around. Jill Stein has a reparation policy. I don't agree with. I have certain issues with it, just as far as how she's going to promote, and this is why I said on stream, how would she promote that, or how to make that viable for people, when right now I think reparations ranks extremely low in the country. What do you plan to do? That's another discussion, but she has a reparations policy. Does Trump? Does Kamala? We know how RFK doesn't believe in cash reparations. So why are you going for the guy? And this is something that kind of pissed me off. On Friday on Twitter, actually, one of the leaders within my city, he is running for councilman right now, basically said Jill Stein is shit. Basically, just straight out on Twitter, Jill Stein is shit. And I basically was like, first of all, that is a bad take coming from you as a person who is in politics. And you should respect the fact that people have their own opinions. And really, if we live in a democracy, they can vote for whoever they want. That's what I basically said. And then he went and basically he went into oh, Jill shit, because of that he went into kind of the Russiagating thing with me. And I was like, no, you need to stop that noise. Hillary did not do what she was supposed to do, because he made the argument Jill Stein ruined it, and that's why we got Trump. And I had to stomp him and be like, no, Hillary actually did not did not go in the Rust Belt, which was what lost her the election. because she figured she was earned those votes rather than actually going to those regions of the country that would have made a difference, that they didn't give a two fucks about her, that they voted for Trump. So at least come correct if you're going to say shit like that. But
yeah, and then the other one, because this is the other point that I had, the biggest, like, it was probably the biggest statement of the whole thing. Ooh, bless you.
Yeah.
The biggest statement of the whole thing that just, like, my mind was like, did she really just say that? Dana said that, and this got into a back and forth between her and Nico about on reparations. And Nico was saying that because you're talking about restitutions, this need to be something that you go through legal means or the courts.
Right.
Sabby brought up that Judge Joe Brown, which is Dana's co-host, talked about, no, you can't do it that way, that you got to do it through Congress.
Wait, pause. I think you said this, but I missed that. She co-hosts with Judge.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot more making sense now. Exactly. Yes. Okay. And so that's what I told Chris. I was like, wow. Well, I would always kind of wondered how things would go hearing more of her, because I always hear Joe Brown. And this is the first time I really got to hear her do a lot more speaking. And so that raised my antennas. But this is the statement that she said. I want to, audience, if y'all didn't hear this, if y'all didn't hear her say this, I want to hear all y'all takes when I say this part. She said, not only do we need to vote for Trump because Trump is the one who's most open, because he's a deal maker to getting cash payments for reparations, but we need to help get Trump a Republican Congress, because reparations can only be done through Congress. And with Trump and a Republican Congress, that's the only way to get reparations.
Yeah, I remember saying that, and I know I didn't say anything, but as I said, probably this was giving it away. Like,
I said, what?
Reparations is never going to happen. As the United States government brings in more people who are even knowledgeable about American history, the less people who would be even more, who are less, they're not inclined at all to support any kind of reparations to the Black Americans who have been here and dealt with and who are owed that. So I don't say that, as I don't say that as if they don't deserve it. I'm just saying it as a matter of fact and just the reality that we're living with. If you take a city, like New York, which used to be whatever, and it turns into, like a Central American city on some level, how are you going to get the people there to support any of that? And you spread that out across the country. You have a population of people that are dying off.
Chris, since you said that, I need to throw this in real quick. This is what Terrain said, which Terrain spoke very brilliantly most of the time. And then when he said this, it raised the eyebrow. He said, the problem is y'all here trying to be kumbaya with all these other people. We don't need anybody else. We can get this done with Black Americans only. And I'm like, you're going to get it through Congress with only Black Americans? And
I don't think so.
Well, I mean, clearly they would probably be the largest, Black group of people in the country. So, I mean, look, if they feel that they could do it and get it done, then, they're more than welcome to try. Clearly, I'm not anybody who's going to tell them not to try. But, from the sidelines, I'm just going to say, I don't think this, I'm going to look over at my homie and I'm just going to say, I don't think this is going to work. Not because I'm being negative, just because I understand the system of who we're dealing with. The people that you're asking to give you money dislike you more than anybody else.
Right. Like the fact that
they actually hate you.
Just going back to what Dana was saying, which again, what we said before, she kind of related to the idea of like, oh, if we get Trump in office, then he's going to do it for us. Like, he will make the wheel and deal, and he's going to do it. No, boo-boo. That's not how it works. And again, it's the idea of like, what are you pushing him to do? You're just assuming that Trump, in good faith, is going to vie for Black people in that way. Well, I probably should have said this on stream, but Trump was president already, and he didn't do it. Now, granted, like, he didn't have full control of Congress, but he could have made a case for reparations during his term. So what makes you think that he's going to do it now, especially if he has like a supermajority of both houses? Best case scenario.
Yeah. Well, in order for the Democrats to pick it up, it has to be coached or wrapped as some kind of LGBTQ thing now with the Democrats, because that seems to be the only community that they forcefully and willfully speak for. You know, at least on its face, at least in the media, that's what you see on social media. That's the only group that they seem to like speak on and for. You know, anybody else
goes to, you would need some kind of a coalition, like goes completely against what Terrain was talking about. You would need some kind of a coalition, and with especially a lot of them talking about delineate. Okay, so you want to section yourself into a smaller group of Black people and think that it gives you more power against a whole bunch of people who don't want to give it to you. Even a lot of your own so-called allies would not want to give it to you. And you got a lot of Black people who don't support it either. Right. And so how I don't understand how you think you can get something like that through Congress.
And this is why I am for, and this is what I was saying on the stream, and I got a lot of hate for saying this, like not from the panel, but like in the chat, like, this is why we need, as Black people within the diaspora, need to stop, especially with the idea of reparations, because if you're Black in the West, it affects you. I don't care who you are. If you're from Jamaica, if you're from the UK, if you're from here, if you're from Brazil, I don't care. Like, if you're here as a Black person, if you're a Black person living in the Western Hemisphere, reparations affects you. That's an issue that is common to all of us. Now, I understand, like, there is probably some regional differences in terms of the country.
We got a tether talking.
That's fine.
That's fine. Talking.
That's fine. Look,
tether.
I've been called worse. I've been called worse all my life, so I really don't give a fuck at this point. So, like, but this is why, in my opinion, we need to do it. We need to think more macroly in terms of, all right, what is the UK doing towards reparations? Like, and I mentioned this on my show maybe a few months ago, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Bartlow, actually, when she spoke at an event at a university in London, that I forgot who it was, but like within like Parliament, she basically brought up the idea to that person, like, hey, reparations, what's up? You know, like, and this is the issue that I have with the FBAs and the ADOS community in terms of, like, look, you're screaming reparations forever. What organizing have you done collectively in order to make that happen? Have you spoken in Congress at all in order to make that happen? Have you spoken to any senator or congressperson in order to make reparations viable? Have you done that? The only thing that I'm seeing from these people is screaming online, oh, we need reparations, and then talking down to people like me, who is actually trying to get reparations on your behalf that I may not benefit from because I am not Black American, but you're going to go at me instead of the people that are not giving it to you, but you will vote for those people. And that's the issue that I had in that regard with everyone on that panel, minus like a few exceptions. Like, they're not going to give you that at all. So why especially if you're a single issue voter, if that's your issue, why are you voting for these people, for the very people that will not give it to you? Like,
well, Terrain also, he said, well, yeah, we don't need to be cozying up with any of these other groups. And then he said, well, maybe we should make films and movies or whatever to make people more sympathetic. So basically, in one breath, you're saying you don't need people, but in the other breath, you're saying you want to try to propagandize to these people or push your message so people will warm up to your position. I mean, the double speak with this community, I don't understand at all. If you look back to the civil rights era, you had multiple. It wasn't just black people doing it. It
like
took multiple people. So, and
black
that's the reason why my standpoint as far as reparations, and I think most of the audience knows this, but I'll reiterate it again. We need to be in league with other oppressed people. That's what Malcolm X said.
Right.
If you're in league with other oppressed people and you fight for it, of course, the people in Haiti, while they're fighting for their reparations, from France, we need to back them 150%.
Exactly.
And then therefore they will back us 150%. We need to back the people in Jamaica when they're fighting against the British Crown. And all of these areas, all of these different places throughout Europe owe reparations.
Right.
All of them do.
If
you back each other for it, then you have a stronger claim. If you have, people who are all pushing and working together.
Right. So
if you're spending your time infighting, you will never get close to anywhere, which I still think it's a tough push uphill anyway to get it, even with everybody all, forming together like Voltron. But if you want to really just break it down to, oh yeah, it's just going to be me and my crew, we're going to fight for the whole 44 million. And okay, going ahead.
Right.
You look to me like what was the old boy from Guardians of the Galaxy, who Drax. You look like Drax jumping into that big monster's mouth with a knife, thinking that you're going to win the battle. You're not.
Well, here's the thing with what Terrain has said. If you're looking to form a coalition, why not try and form a coalition with other black people? Like, not from here. You should be, if you're FBA ADOS, you should try and form a coalition with someone like me who is actually, again,
you fled your country.
But
I'm just repeating. I'm just repeating the stupidity.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I've heard your rants on FBA's ADOS for both of you, and I've commended you both. No, I've commended you both for what you've said, because I absolutely 110% agree with everything you're saying regarding those two groups. And like Yvette Carnell, like I happened to tweet at her for something, and she responded back, and she was like, "Oh well." Like basically said, like, not necessarily her, but her followers do. Like, you go after me all the time, but you do not go after the white supremacist like apparatuses. I don't see them doing that much. But whenever there's an African or Caribbean person that is doing well, you attack them. But you will not attack your own kind. You won't attack the Bakari sellers. You won't attack the Van Jones, like, in your group, who are ADOS, FBAs, I would assume. But you don't mention them, but you'll mention me with the swiftness. And I brought that to Yvette Carnell, and she was like, oh, yeah, we do talk about white supremacy and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, then you need to check your followers then, because they don't seem to be getting that message. Because what I see, especially online, is that they go after everyone who is not from here, and they make that a point, but they don't ever talk about the systems in place that affect all of us. So I just felt like, and I'm sure she knows that, so I felt like she was kind of talking out her side of her mouth in her comment to me. But if you're looking to make a coalition, again, like, we're fighting each, and yeah, like these disaster war bullshit is surely that bullshit, because there should be a means where we're able to align and understand our need collectively within the diaspora for reparations. As I said, there's going to be some regional differences of what that will look like, and we can have that discussion among ourselves. But if you're Black and living in the West, You are owed reparations. Like, it's not like, and I think you said this before, Marcus. It's like, if you're talking about Black Americans who built this country, who built the West Indies, right? Like, my family helped build Barbados and Trinidad. So I'm sorry, FBA's ADOS, you didn't do anything special. Like, just because you built this country doesn't make it unique. It's not unique to what happened like in the Western world. Ultimately, we built the Western Empire for what it is right now, collectively off our damn backs. So collectively, this is a thing that we're all owed, and that should be the coalition primarily that we should figure out among us first. And if there are people non-Black who want to ride with us, fine. But there has to be some type of coalition. Black Americans cannot do it by themselves because you've tried to do it by your damn selves for the past however long. And what has that amounted to? Like, nothing.
That even, again, real quick before I go, I want to take this and pivot this to the association with Trump and the Black journalists. It's the same kind of closed mindset that they had there with that. By now, I'm sure everybody saw Trump sitting with the reporters from the National Association of Black Journalists. What was that, Wednesday or Thursday of this past week? Whatever day it was. One thing that was, as I called and told you, Marcus, that was a performance put on by the Democratic National Committee, right? First and foremost, that was not the behavior of an independent association of journalists at that, because what they put on display was anything but journalism. It was straight up.
I wouldn't go as far as to like outright indict the Democratic Party, because I think you got enough people who were within that Black journalism who are willing to send for them without getting marching orders.
But you know what I noticed even with that, when Trump was speaking, and I'm one to assume they were all Black people in the room, they were cheering for Trump. Like, I noticed that, like, looking.
Yeah, it was mixed. There was some cheers here and there.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. With that journalist, I forgot her name. I didn't necessarily mind her asking those questions that she was asking Trump per se. The issue that I had was, if Kamala was there, would you come at her with the same type of heat regarding her record? I highly doubt it. So, but it just came off as very hostile to me, like, given the circumstance. And I'm sorry, like, I'm no fan of Trump, but I felt like if you're going to come hostile at me, then hell, I'm going to be more than hostile to you. Like, so it just was very unfair for them to kind of treat Trump that way. And like, that being said, with Trump, and again, I kind of get where he was coming from. I guess he felt very slighted in what was going on. So he responded in kind. But some of the things that he was saying, like he brought up Kamala in terms of her race, which, we have issues.
Even somebody from ADOS or FBA is in Trump's camp, is in his ear, because how else would he know how to say that without receiving the backlash that he would have gotten for saying that maybe 10, 20 years ago? So he was able to say that precisely because of the conversations that we've been having in the diaspora. It's been loud and it's spilling over now.
But here's the thing, though. I don't give a fuck about, and I said this with Nico, I don't give a fuck about what you call, like I said to him, if she herself calls herself Black, she might not be, but that's her right to call herself Black. That's her right. I want to know what you're going to do for me as far as policy. That's what the Republicans should be focusing on, is her policy, well, across the board, policy and record. Trump didn't do that. Like, he should have brought it back to, and like, Kamala has plenty of skeletons in the closet that he could have addressed. Instead, he chose to address her ethnicity. And And that's where
Because Trump,
the Republican Party, I'm sorry, are going to be at a disadvantage because the Democrats will talk around that and make that their thing. They're good at making identity and politics a thing, and that's the thing that they're going to focus on. And they will, and that's going to get a lot of sympathy for a lot of people in the Democratic Party in particular. But like,
but I don't think
before, like, and I wanted to, because of that first part, I wanted to jump in on that. I felt like if Trump wouldn't have went all the way to the level and kept beating the horse over and over and over, he would have really gained some brownie points across the board on all sides. If he would have just been like, wow, that's kind of a rude way to start off the interview. You can't say hello, how am I doing? You know, thank you for being here. I mean, I have a gazillion things I could be doing, but I wanted to come here and I thought this was going to be in good faith. Could have left it at that, but he turned it into, and for people who are more sensitive to the liberal obvious attack dogs and the obvious, you know, politically biased, you know, that they showed against Trump. For a lot of the normies out there, that's not going to play well the way he went at her.
no.
And I think that's where Republicans get themselves into trouble a lot of times.
Mhm.
They don't know where to find. They don't know where to find that
the
line. Where
I'll disagree. I push all the way back on that. That's not going to matter. It's going to look. Where is that going to play itself out in? Atlanta, fine. Does Trump need Georgia to be a little bit competitive?
I don't think that's it.
Sure.
I don't think that's it.
It's not going to hurt him dissing those people like that because one, people can see that she was hostile from the start. She didn't even.
Yes,
they didn't.
I didn't disagree that she was hostile from the start. It's about how you do things. That's not. It's the approach. He kind of went very heavy-handed, and what I'm saying is, where a lot of people who haven't made their bones on Kamala or not, everybody's pretty much decided how they feel about Trump or not. Kamala is the one who has the room to be able to gain people, and she can gain people by the way Trump goes at her. Trump is not going to gain an extra person. He's already has his audience set in.
We saw the Kamala movie in 2020. Nobody stayed for it to finish. So again, in 2020, the reboot ain't going to help either.
Yeah, but everybody also isn't paying attention to the Democratic primaries. We're not looking. We're looking at it as if everybody is focused on this stuff as at the same degree we are. And there's a lot of people who are not. A lot of people don't know any of this stuff about Kamala.
But again, all these black people who are saying that Kamala is, you know, a beast in the black community because she went to HSBCU. You'll remember in 2020 when they were wrapping up their primary, they went to South Carolina and they said, hey, Biden's our guy. I didn't see none of these HBCU people complaining about, hey, we wanted a chance to vote for our sister. We wanted a chance to show our support for her. They were silent. They didn't give a fuck. Right?
Yeah,
but that just shows how fickle they are. Like, we have very short memories when it comes to politics in this country, I think. Because really, if you weren't fucking with Kamala in 2019, 2020, really, you shouldn't be fucking with her now. But I think the idea, because Trump is so bad, and, you know, and the idea of Project 25 is just so bad. And I make the argument, like, if you complain about 2025, what about Project 7076? That's been an issue since the birth of this fucking country.
But I would also throw here's another thing. Because they chose other people than Kamala, does that necessarily mean that all those people, if Kamala is the only choice, would not flock to Kamala? There's a whole bunch of people who went Bernie's way. There's people who went for Biden because he's the establishment candidate, and that's who they were messing with. There were people for Warren. Now, because they prefer these other candidates over Kamala, does that automatically mean that they're not fucking with Kamala? I don't think that's clearly that means that. I think, as you can see with how many people have jumped out there for Kamala, even though I think that's crazy, it shows that, okay, when all the other options are taken off the board and she's what's left, a lot of these people are going to coalesce around Kamala.
Right. Right.
I
And that's
mean, by default, yeah, because
Yeah.
people just feel
by
like they
default,
have
right,
to.
exactly.
Biden
They have
Biden
rights
was
to
by
be
default.
Right.
Biden was by
White states
default.
just
I
have
wouldn't
to be a
argue by
Democrat.
default. Like he was selected to be the default in the way that Kamala was
Same
selected
thing.
to be the default.
But I
So
think
basically, again, it's
without
the idea of that binary thinking of like, okay, I may not like it, but this is all we got. So I guess I have like it's kind of that exacerbated idea of like, I guess I have to vote. And like I've had people say this to me, like, I don't particularly like her, but I'm gonna vote for her. And it's like, first of all, you don't have to. You do not have to vote for her. Nothing is also a choice. Like
correct, you don't need
a
to.
third of
And
the people in
again,
this country don't vote. So
if you think about it, if you list just even listening to Kamala when she's off script, just with her ability just to even to talk, she can't even get that shit correct.
Well, I
She
think that's what's
sounded.
going to trip her up. That's
right,
the part that's going to trip her up when she has to actually do real interviews.
right. No,
She
like
doesn't.
that's
She's
why
not
she
good on her
hasn't.
feet. She's not even well versed in the basics of the things that she needs to be,
No,
on. So it's almost like, what have you been doing this whole time? I think she's actually a clown of a character. You know what I'm saying? Probably even more so than Trump. Because at the very least with Trump, I could look at him and say, well, you know what? He comes from the Vince McMahon school of wrestling and he likes all this entertainment shit. So there's a reason for his shtick. But Kamala, you're supposed to be intelligent, accomplished, and all this stuff like that. But I don't see the accomplishments nor the intellect when I listen to you. And look,
no.
you got better grades than me. You've ascended to better place in society than me. Who am I? I get that part. However, I'm just saying I don't see why she is so special and why the Democrats are,
I would argue
stuck
the
on her
reason
like
why is because one, her parents were, I mean, they were immigrants, but they had privilege. She grew up with some, like, she went to school in Canada. Like, she went to school in and I don't think a lot of people know that, but she spent her middle school, which is funny because I had to check this with Indy yesterday because I noticed that it's funny how, like, when they're talking about her Kamala and her early life, they skip her childhood and go right to she went to Howard.
HBCU.
Yeah, she went to Howard. I'm like, what happened prior to that? She went to an athlete school in Montreal for like her middle school and high school years and spent her elementary school years in Oakland. But both her parents were professors. So, so she
lived in an affluent tax bracket, right? She
so
didn't.
not exactly like me, but like I relate to that because I came here. I didn't necessarily grow up in that. My mom was a nurse, but like I went to private schools, like for middle school and high school once I came in this country. So I was in the vein of that affluence, which led me to where I went to college and all that. Saying that's what happened with Kamala, essentially. So, so it just kind of shows, and I understand like the idea of like some of the FBA ADOS issue is that kind of builds into the idea of like, oh, she's an immigrant, so she has access to a lot of the things that we may not necessarily have access to, which to a point I agree with. I definitely do agree with that. But again, it's the idea of like, who gave that? Like, who gave that?
Yeah, with Kamala. With Kamala, it's simple as this, right? She clearly is. She clearly will just do the bidding. She'll be a handmaiden, as are the rest of them. She'll just be even more of a handmaiden because she just doesn't have any like aspirations to like want to do this. So she'll just basically do whatever comes down the line from her bosses. She'll just repeat and move along and carry the bag wherever it needs to go. There won't be any major change in foreign policy. There won't be any change in any domestic policy, really. We'll just continue going on. With Trump, at least it will just be noisy and entertaining for me. Because at this point, I'm just liking to see the reaction to people from Trump, going back to his appearance with the journalists. Those people claim to be journalists. They didn't ask one good question. I didn't go to school for it.
Well,
but
I
there
would say
were
one good question, but they didn't even wait around to actually get an answer. They let the conversation be switched over.
Right.
Yeah, they had
Again,
an opportunity.
I felt the questions
Because
that
the
were asked,
qualified immunity would have been a good question,
right.
but it got sidetracked, I felt, when old girl started bringing up January 6th stuff.
Mhm.
And it's like whoever the girl who was in the blue, I'm sorry, it's a grown woman, whoever she was, she literally sounded like they just snuck in a Kamala staffer. I mean, plain and simple. Or Kamala could have asked those questions herself. That's what it sounded like to me. I think that Harrison Faulkner asked some decent questions, like and because the other woman took up so much of the time, you didn't get to drill down on any of the questions, which I felt could have went somewhere. When she asked about the Project 2025, she could have asked, okay, so before you made the comment that you like certain things about it, but some of the things are horrible, which things do you find horrible within Project 2025, and which things do you feel are cool that will line up with your agenda? And that would have been a good question. Or to ask the question, I mean, I like asking questions about JD Vance. I felt that was stupid. He's not the head of the ticket. That's a waste of time. A lot of those questions were just waste of time questions. Right. And like I told Chris, I said, if we're bringing somebody onto our platform and we don't necessarily agree with them, and they're trying to convince us on why we should support them, I'm going to ask questions to hear what is your answer on this, instead of spending the time trying to pick apart your answer. Even if I think it's ridiculous, I'm going to try to hear out what you have to say. Except for if it's something like when he talked about the whole, they're letting them abort them after birth, I would have probably had to push back and say that's actually murder. Once a baby is born, that's not abortion. Abortion is preventing a birth. So you can't have an abortion after birth. But, we're dealing with somebody that I don't feel like even understands what he's saying half the time.
It just felt very personal to me, just overall, with that woman, with the questions that she wasn't there to learn or to help people understand what Trump might be doing. She was only there to antagonize Trump because that's what you do with Trump. And that's not journalism. Like, you don't have to like Trump. You don't have to like Kamala, but you shouldn't. You can have a bias. That's fine. I have a bias.
We all have a bias.
But I think but if you're in media, you have to be you have to create questions so that it's very well. My thing is try and ask open-ended questions so that allow people just to talk, and then they can hang themselves up on their own. Usually, if you ask the question in the right way, but it was very much like very leading, like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? No, and it's just kind of like,
well, that's why I say
me or whatever.
But that's why I say it was a full-on program produced by the DNC, because if they even wanted to politically make people of Trump's side even hesitate a little bit, not that you would cause much hesitation or turn too many of his people off, but you could ask something about COVID, right? Hey, we had the lockdown, a lot of your people didn't like it, but you pushed it. You also pushed for the serum. God forbid we face anything like that again and you're in charge. You're going to do the same nonsense. You're going to listen to the same group of people
I don't think they would have ever, none of them would have ever asked that question, because because they supported what was done. So none of them would have asked that question.
Right. Correct. But I'm saying, to know anything, if you're a journalist now, right? If you would have known something, that his answer would have reverberated much louder in his space.
I take your point. If they would have asked that from setting him up like playing chess kind of trap.
Correct, because that wouldn't obviously the a lot of liberal Democrats and all that, they bought into the whole everything as it relates to Corona. You know, it was his people, his base, more or less, who were really pushing back against it. So that could have been a way to show them, like, look,
Shout out to Rick.
again,
What's up,
you
Rick?
morons. It's the same thing. It's like, yes, correct. It is. And Rick, you said it. It's all culture war shit coming
shout
from
out
left.
to Laura on Rockfin and
Yeah,
Denver.
it's all culture. It's all culture war shit for the next, you know, several months. It's only culture war because the economy, they can't do anything, and they have no ideas, and it's all going to be culture war stuff. But going back to the thing, and you know, before I got to go, again, these associations that Black people align themselves with always allow their association to get hijacked by the Democratic Party, and or they are just fronts for the Democratic Party in some kind of way. It's really embarrassing. And, you know, for you FBA people out there who like talking shit about tethers and all that, that's mainly your people. And by the way, I just want to let y'all know that's mainly ADOS people. That's your aunties, that's your fathers, that's your mamas, your aunties, your cousins. So y'all have a lot of problems all over the place before, you know, you start talking about tethers and shit, because the CBC, which is mostly y'all again, is ineffective. You don't get anything done. You had a chance to talk with Trump and to ask really good questions, at least to put him in a certain light. You couldn't even do that, right? Because you're so fucking emotional. Stop with your emotions. And again, you know what? It's okay to have Black men participate in these events as well. Because again, we watch it, you put 3 women up there just so you can at the same time show, look, it's a strong Black woman standing up to the big, scary Donald Trump. But then at the same time to say, oh, we're victims by big, scary Donald Trump. Look how he talked to me. So are you big and strong, or are you a victim? Which one? Because if you dealt it the way you dealt it, then you should really expect it to come back the way that it came back to you. So all of that, I don't like. Marcus feels he went a little too far. I think he could have went even a little further with the disrespect and the dismissiveness. That's how I would have been to them, because you already showed me you don't like me. And, you know, it is what it is. So to all these Black organizations, you know, largely controlled by FBA and ADOS people, you have done the diaspora here in America. You've done bad over the course of the years. Yeah, there's some of you within these organizations who mean well, but the vast majority of you are just lazy, and you fall into whatever the Democratic Party wants you to do. So by that, I reject all of that. So which is why when Trump comes and he humiliates you guys, I laugh at y'all, because you should be smarter than this by now.
The only reason why I say that I felt like he went too far is because a lot of the people who have their biggest, you know, the Trump derangement or whatever, when he does that stuff, it reminds them of why they why they have so much feelings of angst and frustrations against him. You don't want Democratic turnout to be higher. Then that's self-inflicting when you're going as far, because then that's going to make them want to come out. The people who don't want to fuck with Kamala at all, they're going to be like, well, I got to, because I cannot have that coming back.
They ran,
and I don't feel it's helpful for you to feel like you need to always go balls to the wall to the max. You don't always need to do that. It's counterproductive. You're not going to bring out any more of your base. Your base is locked. And I don't think they're going to sway over any extra independence. Maybe if RFK finally drops out, but I don't see them swaying any extra people over to the Trump side who are not already on the Trump side.
No, I think really right now, you're right, Marcus. I think right now it's just like, it's everything. I will argue things are set as they will be. Like, you're going to have people who are going to vote for Trump anyway. You're going to have people who, and I would make the argument, I don't think people will say this out loud, I think the people who are now going to bat for Kamala would have voted for Biden if they had to. Like,
without doubt.
Like, they would have said, I can't vote in terms of this issue or whatever, but would have voted for Biden. I'm positive. Like if he were still the nominee,
They're using the 2015 playbook against Donald Trump in 2024. He went against a candidate with the highest name recognition ever in Hillary Clinton, and she lost that. If it wasn't for the bullshit they did in the 2020 election with the mail-in ballots, we would have been over with this Trump era. But instead, they did their little shenanigans, and now they got to deal with it for another 4 more years. Had they just let things play out, we'd be over with it. But they need to do whatever they needed to do, and now we're here. So as far as Trump goes, I would just go as hard as possible in these people. I would. I mean, I know. People telling him not to, you got to chill. But at this point in time, y'all done called me everything in the book. Y'all have said everything and anything. Whoever like me. Whoever don't can kiss my, you know what. We moving on.
Right. I mean, and again, as I said earlier, I would have minded that journalist going in as hard with Trump as she did if she was going to be fair, and if Kamala was in the room, which she had done the same thing with Kamala with her record.
Or if she had at least previously shown an ability to go at Kamala in that same regards.
Right.
Yeah, like so if she already had a record of going after Kamala and other Democrats in a harsh manner like that, then we'd be like, oh, that's just how she does it,
Right. But I'm sure, and I get, so along with that, I get what Chris is saying in terms of like that was co-opted by the DNC because she had that bias clearly for Trump. But if she were with Kamala, it would have been like, girl, like, come let me talk. Like, it would have been, they would have been kicking and having a whole lot of fun with her.
Girl, you had Megan at the show, girl. Don't she look so good? I love all her songs that I never heard before. But anyway,
yeah. I thought, I mean, and I also think that it's a problem to think that you can run against Kamala the same way you ran against Hillary. I think Hillary was far more despised, and you barely beat Hillary. Right. I don't think that that's a good move to run that way around. And I'm just talking. I'm putting on my strategist hat for a moment. I'm just saying strategic wise, because I know a lot of people have whatever they feel about 2020 election, but I was around. I talked to plenty of people who voted for Trump before, and I know of plenty of people that he lost. He lost a lot of people. So this belief that it was necessarily stolen from him, I'm like, you did lose a lot more people. That you pissed off plenty of people who were in your camp who were like, I didn't think that he was just going to do what he did. And so if you barely won closely and you lost some people, I don't think it's a hard leap to believe that it's not as much funny business as people are trying to say that it was with the J6 people. I'm not in that camp necessarily believing.
They even asked him about January.
Yeah, they shouldn't have brought that up. That was stupid. That was
you bringing that up, and again, as we see, again, it's almost like these people. Do they live on the internet or not? Because they seem to know about what's on the internet, except for things that go against the narrative, right?
It's like Trump she literally took a list of everything that she had a bitch about for the past 4 years against Trump and was like, now I have my opportunity to vent all the stuff I've been mad at you about. And it's
emotional.
Like, come on,
that's the problem.
You're not professional at all handling this. Even when you're dealing with somebody you don't agree with, you got to be more professional than that.
This is the problem with the Democrats, progressives. They're allowing too many emotional people to take control of the narrative and drive. It's all emotion. That's it. Oh, I feel bad for this. It's too much whining and crying, man. Way too much whining, bro. Way too much. Like they don't even know how to fight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on that note, we're all in the same token there. And I know Chris got to get out of here. He stayed longer than he needed to, but we're getting ready to close this out. I wanted to I don't know. I'm gonna still try to see if we can get Chris to the DNC convention because last minute I wasn't able to go, work stuff. But I'm thinking now if I put my if I put it out there early enough, I don't know. I might go to the inauguration. I don't know who's going to be elected, but it'd be interesting to talk to people. And so that probably give a good time to holler at my boy Collin. Hopefully, take me to some good places to eat in DC because I'm be looking for you.
Actually, let me just check because I probably will have off that day.
I mean, because I'm thinking, why not get out to the inauguration? I can do that since I didn't get to do the CNC thing.
Let me just check.
And I can plan this shit ahead of time. And plus, I've never been to DC, so what better? I mean, go before they start World War III and the Capitol's not standing anymore.
So
there's a message for.
I think if it's on MLK Day, the inauguration, I believe, right?
Is it?
I think so. Because if it is, then I have off anyway. So
let me see when it is.
So in the chat, if you know, actually, let me. Yep, it is.
It's on MLK?
Yep.
Okay.
Like, I can just imagine if Kamala ended up winning and she will use that just being like, getting inaugurated on the same day as MLK. Like, oh, God. But I have a theory that I want to bring to you guys because we've been talking about this on INN. I want to see what you guys think.
Sure.
We think collectively that the Democratic Party knows Kamala is not going to win. Here's my take on that, more specific to me.
That's what I said before.
I think she will probably win the popular vote for sure. The Electoral College, no. But we think the Democrats have already conceded to the idea that Trump will win. They're using Kamala as a sacrificial lamb, which kind of makes sense because given how poorly she polled back in 2019, 2020, like, it doesn't really make sense to me, like, when there are other candidates that probably would have been a lot stronger than her to put up instead of her. So we think that they're using her as a sacrificial lamb to basically go against Trump, and also in a way to make her not viable for her to be president ever again. But basically go do what they will probably want to do anyway with Biden is if Trump won, then they'll just spend the next 4 years fundraising off his ass, kind of a la 2016, and just do that whole song and dance over again. That's what we're kind of thinking right now in terms of.
Look, the people who claim to hate Trump, they can talk all they want. The people who own these companies who get ad dollars and views and get paid off of that, they love nothing more than this man coming back into the forefront. Okay? Yeah. The ad dollars on cable TV are about to go up. There's going to be political commentators who will get more money now. The Democratic Party, that wing of, the Uniparty, as you said, is going to be able to fundraise on levels for not seen for a while, because after this, I don't know who they would make it to the next boogeyman. But, this is their last hurrah to make a ton of money off of a character such as Donald Trump. Yeah. Because you wouldn't be able to raise all this money against the Mitt Romney. You know what I'm saying? Like, you'll raise money against Mitt Romney, but he's not setting you off emotionally the way that Trump does. It's like, oh, it's a Republican. Yeah, I'll give you a few bucks, but Trump, and when you add in Trump derangement syndrome, people ready to give their left breast to beat him.
I mean, I guess I'm the minority position on this. I don't think that. I think that they knew that they couldn't swap Kamala out. They would have swapped Kamala out. They would have, because what happened is when they went with this whole Biden and Kamala pick, they basically trapped themselves back then. It's like, as far as playing chess, they had already walked them down a strategy that was possibly going to put them in checkmate.
I'm gonna push back on you a little bit because I think you're right partially in the sense that Biden /DNC trapped himself in saying, I'm only going to vote I'm only going to have a person of color for vice president. I think that was where he kind of.
Well, I think that they could have got away with it if they would have picked somebody else besides
But then
Kamala.
again, it's a Democratic Party. Like where there's a will, they will figure out a way.
Well,
Like,
I don't see Trump as unbeatable as everybody else does. I really don't. I think that I really think that picking JD Vance was a mistake, and I think that it's going to actually have more people more freaked out to go and vote for Kamala. I also think if they push the abortion stuff heavily, that's going to be, albatross around Republicans' neck because it's not a popular policy. I think,
but I'm saying what we have to remember this: we have the electoral college.
But
right?
what do you mean? What do you mean?
So
what states?
What states are we talking about?
They narrowly won.
It doesn't matter. New York, California don't matter. Are you
Pennsylvania is a state that they can win. Let's see, Michigan's a state that they can win. I mean, it's plenty of states that they can win.
Right,
there's plenty of swing states out there.
I think really,
no, there's not only three. The math changes once you take Biden off the ticket. The math changes. It's not only three. Because the numbers have switched in multiple different states. I mean, it's different things to factor in. And so I don't think that it's so open and shut.
That's what I'm asking you. Which states are we saying that Trump would hurt himself?
I'd still have to see down the road to see how that goes. I mean, I think that the abortion issue, like it hurt Republicans during the midterms. It hurt them, plain and simple. And if Democratic women in general vote more during general elections than off-year primary elections, it's going to be a higher turnout of female voters, especially on the whole abortion stuff. And I think if they're able to successfully scare the shit out of enough of them with Project 2025, and if there's enough unforced errors from Republicans, that could actually embolden turnout on the other side. So I don't think that it's this Trump closed shut case as I did maybe a month ago.
I do agree that I think it's still, we still have a few months.
I mean, now Kamala could screw up and then close that door on herself.
That's probably why she hasn't spoken yet, because, and as I said, the honeymoon period will be over when she opens her mouth. She hasn't given a news conference or had a sit-down interview with anyone yet to really expand upon what she hopes to do yet. So, and I'm sure they're working on that with her right now, because knowing her, as Chris said, she's not good off the cuff, but she is good when she is, prosecutor.
And she don't have to. And she don't have to last that long.
Prepared, she don't have to last that. Okay. So
if she had to do a whole 6 months of being the candidate, but there's a lot less there. Well, what they were able to do with Biden is they were able to say, okay, we can hide our candidate away and know that he can't talk. He's going to have all these goofs, hide him away. And we're not going to get any pushback for it. They can basically do the same thing with Kamala, since it's not that much time left, and they can get close to the finish line. And so I'm not ready to just say, automatically Trump got this. When I factor in when Trump did win, he barely won against a equally very unpopular candidate against him. I mean, let's not forget. So that's Trump has a hardcore support base for the people who support Trump, but he also has a shitload of people who hate Trump.
Right, but
I think that
I can't. We can't.
I'm not saying that they're
when we break
for Kamala. I'm saying votes against Trump.
But when we break this down on the political map, it matters none, because Hillary was unpopular and popular. Kamala is known and she's unpopular. So to me, there's no chance for her. Trump is going to win this election.
I think, honestly,
I don't think real quick, I'll finish up. In the 4 states that it's going to matter: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and possibly Wisconsin. Again, does Kamala have any juice in any of those places? Do the Democrats have any juice in any of those places? Because last time we were running, we were talking about Joe Biden, and NAFTA and the effects of that, etc. You're going to have somebody who is now going to come in to talk to you more about other issues than economics. This guy is saying, hey, you guys are all messed up here. Hey, let's get manufacturing back. Even if it doesn't come back, just the fact that he says it, right? That's going to do something for them people who have been greatly affected in those particular states. So I think it's a wrap. They have absolutely nothing other than Trump is mean. That's the only thing.
I mean, have you not paid attention to any of the polls, though?
Right. I'll say this.
Because that's not what the polls are showing at all.
Well, right now.
I saw them. I'm paying them shits. No mind. None.
Because here's the thing. East Palestine, even though Ohio is red, that seeps into Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, which is red. So you're going to have that issue there. Like, as far as economics, as Chris was saying, in the Midwest, just generally, that is going to come up. So again, it's the idea of, comes back around to policy. What is she saying? Well, both of them. What are they saying in terms of policy? I think that's where Trump has a slight advantage, because his followers don't give a shit. They only want him back in. Like, Kamala, I would argue, has a little bit more to prove in terms of there are going to be people who are just going to vote for her anyway. But I think there's now going to be a lot more people, and we see this even in our community, that are on the fence about Kamala. Given
trust me, I don't know about you, Collin, but I know several black folks who are like, nah, I ain't fucking with that chick. They don't.
Right, exactly. Right.
I
was even saying Cali.
Like, I would throw in also. There are a lot of people who are not fucking with Kamala, who weren't going to vote anyway, who don't vote anyway, who haven't voted who haven't voted in 20 years.
Right.
And how much of those
I'm talking about amongst people who voted recently, at least in the last 2 to 3 elections.
I can tell you speaking for Cali, speaking for somebody living in Cali, yeah, she could lose the entire Bay Area. She can lose all of Orange County, but she ain't going to lose LA. And she still wins the state of California easily.
Maybe.
And that's what I'm saying. There's enough people who, I mean, I think it's underselling how many people have a disdain for Trump. I think that's an underselling point. I think that there's plenty of people that, I'm not saying that people are like, they want to vote for Trump, Kamala, because they believe in her or anything like that. I think a lot of Kamala's votes are anti-Trump votes.
Yes.
And that has to be factored in. That's all I'm saying. And I don't think anything is a lock yet. I don't at all.
It can't get any worse. It can't get any worse for him than him coming down the steps and saying people come from shithole countries and the rest of it. So you can't use the 2015.
What I'm saying is, I believe Trump has a ceiling. Trump has a ceiling on his voters. It's a period. I don't feel like Trump is gaining any extra people than anybody who's already been on the Trump train. He's not gaining any extra people.
I would argue this: the attempted assassination attempt might, somewhat.
but nothing is showed that that's actually moved the needle at all. Nothing is showed that that's moved the needle. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, all it's done is took Trump voters and made them more amped up, and it's made them more, 10 toes down for Trump. That's all I think it's done.
Right. But I think at the end of the day, at this point, like, we still have months to go. But yeah, it's a toss-up. Really, I mean, it was a toss-up in 2016.
That's what I'm saying. It's still a toss-up.
That being said, though, I feel like
no,
or both of them, but I think with Kamala, to me, again, especially Black community aside, has a little bit more that she needs to prove. Yeah, she's going to get the people who are going to vote for her anyway, but given the state of the world right now, that may not be enough. So
I see a 40. I see 52 to 48 Trump right now. But I look at it as it's not no
Right,
like
but
a 70-30 split.
right,
Like Trump just got this shit
right.
in the bag.
But
Not
my
even close.
argument
Not in my
is
mind.
if the situation in the Middle East, which right now seems to be getting worse, that could affect things.
But it's gonna get worse either way.
It's going to get worse either way. But I think the fact is, and I said this, that we are now sending our Navy over there now. And I've said this, if one American dies from that conflict actively over there, because right now that's still under Biden's control. Like our generation remembers
People stick
Iraq.
with any war. People stick with the people with the party that's in power.
Right. So,
historically, that's what they've done every single time.
Israel, though,
I think with Israel, though,
I think with Israel, though, that's kind of turned that theory on its head somewhat. But
how?
Like
because either way, the only difference between a Trump administration and a Harris administration on Israel is Trump is going to openly say, yes, Israel, go do whatever you want. And Kamala is going to say, shame on you, don't do that, while handing them all the money and letting them do whatever they want.
Right.
It's just a rhetoric change. It's still going to be in action. The same thing is going to happen.
Right. I don't know, but I mean,
I got to run. I'm out of here. Y'all finish up. I'll be listening. Collin, thanks for coming through. Marcus, I'll holler at you. Everybody in the crowd, hit like, subscribe, all that good shit. Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. And I can't see if any new comments are coming in on Rockfin, so apologies. I'm not ignoring y'all. I'm just going through this, but I don't see it as so locked. I really don't.
I don't either at this point. I think there's still a lot of factors now. Like, we don't know who Kamala's VP is going to be yet. We're not going to know that.
No, I think if she picks Shapiro, I think that's
the same which I highly doubt at this point is going to happen.
The reason why I think that there is solid evidence that she may pick him, which I think would be a huge mistake, is part of she's saying she's narrowing down her picks and she's going to start off campaigning right there in his city next week around the time she's saying she's going to announce. And so why are you lining up to be in his city when you're about to release the pick?
Right.
And in my opinion, it's only come down to about 3 people. And I don't know, let me know if you disagree with the picks. I think it's either Shapiro, Waltz, or Arizona, Kelly. It's only those 3.
Yeah. Like, I mean, as I said, they're all Zionists in certain ways, so it really doesn't matter. But if she picks Shapiro, that would probably be the worst.
Yep.
Of the bunch,
because then she canceled her chance of getting Michigan at all.
So,
she's destroyed herself in Michigan.
Right. So I want to think that they are aware of that and they will not pick him for that reason. But then again,
I think that they're that blind. I really think that.
I mean, that's
you're
what
talking
I'm
about the DNC here.
I know that. Look, I'm saying that because in my mind, that's where I'll be going. But I also know it's the DNC; they don't care. So I do know
they're hearing the Obama cadence.
They were smart.
They're thinking Obama cadence. He's in a swing state that can possibly bring us votes, and he's a very popular governor. That's all they see.
I would, according to what I've seen in people who live in Pennsylvania, I think from what I've heard, there's somewhat of people regret that he's there, somewhat. So,
I'm talking about as far as what polling is showing on paper. Now, on the ground, what people are saying, that's always a different story.
Right. But yeah, but I think at the end of the day, it's going back to who Kamala's VP is going to be. It's going to, if we do have debates, and or if Kamala has, now I would argue whatever interview she has will be heavily scripted. She will be as prepared as she can. So she has that slight advantage there if they do it that way. But we don't know what's going to happen.
I think Kelly would be the smart pick, though. He doesn't bring you Arizona. You're not going to get Arizona.
Right.
Arizona's just out of the reach.
Honestly,
he does help you as far as his stance on immigration and the border.
Right. Like, I just see with Shapiro, I just feel like he has more that people, especially right now, are against, especially since people are very actively, at least online and what I see in the media, very kind of actively opposed to him. That doesn't mean that she won't pick him. I just feel like of the three, Waltz is the least problematic of the three, but like,
I think middle of the road voters might not like him because they might feel he's a little too progressive. And he doesn't bring a state, so I look at super delegates with frown on that.
Right. So I don't know. Like,
that's why I'm leaning. I'm like, I look at it. It's between Kelly. Honestly, it's between Kelly and Shapiro, and I think they don't pick the smart pick ever. If they got three options, they're going to pick the worst one of the three.
Right.
And Shapiro would be the worst of the three.
But honestly,
Nadia brings up a good point. I wasn't going to go there, but Nadia brings up a good point.
But honestly, if she picks Shapiro, in a way, kind of evens out because Trump has a shitty pick with Vance, he has a shitty pick with him. So,
I think she puts the rope around her own neck if she picks Shapiro.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
she deads her campaign.
Right. But like, you can argue Trump did that with Vance. So it's just kind of like,
well, but the thing with Vance, I feel like it's different. See, Trump is not going to lose any votes with Vance, but he increases Democratic turnout with Vance. Kamala can lose turnout actually by picking the wrong VP.
Yes.
And so Kamala is at a point where she can gain. She doesn't necessarily have a ceiling right now.
But I think it matters with what community she's willing to lose.
Yeah.
Like, I would argue, like, if she picks Shapiro, she will more than likely lose the young vote.
The young vote and the Arab vote.
Which they might be like, who gives a shit? We're just going to target, which I think they probably would do anyway, is target like older suburban moms, essentially. That's their base.
They can't get that. Well, they already got that with Kamala.
They already got that in place anyway. So
you're not getting an ad there, and Waltz.
But
I think that Kelly could also give where they've lost voters,
however,
as far as older voters.
Right. However, I could see if Waltz is progressive, that might be something, especially for like, I don't want to say Bernie camp, but like if he's sounding progressive, it might be appealing for younger voters in a sense.
For the TYTs and the Crystal and Kyles and all of those types of audience, Majority Report, yes. Yeah. But how many of them are going to actually turn up to vote for Kamala? They'll like it, but how many of them are going to actually, when it comes down to voting for her, it? Many of them are going to vote for Jill Stein, Cornel West, or sit on their hands.
Right. I don't know.
So I look at she got to already count out that she's not getting the left. Like the leftists.
They don't give a fuck.
She got to know she's not getting any of the leftists.
No. The Democrat Party doesn't care about the left. No, they don't.
So the only thing she could try to appeal for is she's either looking at swing state or she's looking at reeling in the older voters or immigration minded voters, which some of them be like, well, at least she's taking this more serious, though they might like Trump's stance more. Some of the Democrats who are a little softened as far as the immigration stuff might like the Mark Kelly. Plus, I look at older voters like the patriotic stuff.
Right.
He's
But
an
it'll be
astronaut, former military. They're gonna eat that stuff up.
right. But here's the thing. This is where I think the Republicans have the advantage, because whoever they pick, like, because Trump you can talk about all day, people don't necessarily care. Like Vance, I feel like that might I feel like you can only talk about Vance to a point, especially like if he just keeps quiet, for the remainder of the election season. But again, it's the idea of like Kamala needs to be vetted, whoever his VP needs to be vetted.
But
And
but at this point in time, it's too late. It's too late. They're not, because they can't switch. You can't switch at this point.
No, I'm not saying anything about switching, but like
also, let's say for instance they didn't put Kamala up. Who else have they got in the stable who they could even run?
Oh God, like would it matter? Like,
I mean,
like
what are you gonna do? Put up Pete Buttigieg?
Hell, I knew people who would vote for Pete Buttigieg even now. Like,
That's what I'm saying. He's
that's what I'm saying.
He's
like,
the same lateral move as Kamala.
Right, but that's my point. I think that's my point in terms.
I think 2020 they destroyed the bench. They destroyed the bench when they picked Biden.
Right. I think. Well, yeah, but like, no, I think we've made that. I've said that argument. Like, you guys fucked over yourselves because you did your dirty deed to get Biden in, and essentially you did your dirty deed in order to kick Biden out. So you basically fucked over yourselves. No, I definitely agree with that. But my thing is, if they didn't want Kamala, like, to be the nominee, the Democrats would have figured something. I don't know what it is.
They couldn't have because then they would have lost black women voters if they would have went for anybody else. They couldn't get rid of. Now the only thing they could have done is they could have kept her at VP and put somebody ahead of her.
Mm-hmm.
They could have did that.
That's what I think.
And then and black vote would have been a little ticked, but they were like, okay, she's still.
They will get over it.
They could get over that. If you would have yanked her all the way off the ticket, you would have infuriated the black vote, especially black women vote, and you would have lost a lot of campaign dollars. You would have lost.
Right. But again, I think it just goes back to way back. It's like Kamala was not really the best. She wasn't the best VP pick at all.
But no, not at all.
But they pigeonholed themselves, and this is again the fault of the Democrat Party, is that they value identity politics. Biden shot himself in the foot. Well, the DNC shot themselves in the foot by essentially saying it was going to be a woman of color that was going to be vice president, which basically all it was her. And so, and now they're kind of stuck in this position.
Wow, they blocked my comments on the stream.
But I don't know. But like, I think there's still going to be it's still anyone's game, really. But at this point, it's basically even one's election to lose at this point. But ultimately, to me, it's like we're fucked either way. So it's like, for me, it's just like, I don't give a crap who wins. It's like nothing is going to fundamentally change between the two of them. The only thing with Trump is that we're only going to hear about Trump for like the next 4 years ad nauseum. And like Kamala, it would be just more of the same of what's happening right now. People are just going to put their heads in the sand and just be like, just kind of ignore like all the atrocities that she kind of is complicit to. Mm-hmm. That's really the only thing that's going to be.
I just think that because of like, especially with Twitter, you've had such an outsized voice now from the right that I think it's giving people a distortion that Trump has more support than he does. We're just hearing a lot more of it because they've taken it and they've turned it into a right-wing platform pretty much.
Right.
So I think that we're just hearing more of it. I'm telling you, out here, there are plenty of people who I don't get it, but they love Kamala. I don't get it at all, but they do. Yeah. And that's what I'll say there.
But what is it? Is it love for Kamala or just loyal to the party?
I think a lot of it is party, but you got a lot of people out here who are in love with identity politics, and they want to
Right.
see a woman president, and then you have like I think it's understated the amount of people in the Asian community who would like to see her. There, I know everybody focuses on the black community. There are a lot of people in the Asian community that would like to see an Asian president,
Right.
and
And
yeah.
I would argue she would probably do a lot more for the Asian community than she
Of
she's
course, she
so
already did when she was out here in Cali. So, I mean, I already know she's going to. But
right.
I saw a comment that I was like, I can't help but respond to because anytime I see these comments, it always frustrates me. I'm gonna put the first one up.
Okay.
I'll read it. It says, I know, but why doesn't that bother Black Americans, specifically those who insist on voting Democrat? I have an idea as far. Oh, wait a minute, not that one. But it was talking about basically that the Black community was the party of the KKK. Well, back in that time, Republicans, most white people were the party of the KKK.
Right.
So it doesn't matter Democrats or Republicans. Both of
Right.
y'all wasn't messing with black people. Neither one of y'all care about black people.
Right. And back then the KKK were primarily Democrats back then.
Yeah, what I'm saying is even the white Republicans, they didn't care about black people either. So
Right.
the country as a whole had a negative view towards black people. And so, oh well, just because some of these people, and now if you look in cities where I've seen the KKK march, most of those people current today are Republicans. So this whole, well, they're the history of, that's just idiotic.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult you, but most people who align to that, they will tell you themselves they are Republicans. And also you get a lot of the mostly anti-black rhetoric, like the openly comes from the right.
Right.
So to try to play this,
Democrats don't have those.
well, theirs is just more closeted. Theirs is closeted.
Yeah.
They're the we hear you,
and then
don't do anything.
But policies
that screw you over.
Right.
But Republicans literally flip both middle fingers up to us on a regular basis on damn near everything. So you can't play this. Well, they're the party of the KKK. Come on, just miss us with that. And that's the reason why that argument gets nowhere with black people. It gets absolutely nowhere, because we can look online and see, I don't know how many Republican sites who put out nothing but anti-black propaganda all day long and ignore everybody else. So it just miss us on that race baiting from the right stuff.
Right.
But I did like this one that Nadia said here. It says, I have an idea as far as international conflicts go. If there are two leaders who are beefing, they should get in the ring and fight each other instead of sending our young people to fight in their wars.
Yeah,
I 1000% commend that.
Like, and that's why I've said it's like, if especially in terms of Israel, if you want us to go to war so bad with Israel, with Iran,
send your kids. Put your kids on the front line.
Not even send yourselves. You be on the front lines.
Because I still got it pinned about I still got it pinned about what is his name, Ben Shapiro. Why can't we put a gun in your hand and you hop on that front line? I really want to see you go really support this, like you say.
Right. Like, and even with that, people are not thinking about this. Like, you volunteered for the IDF, but not for the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
we don't give veterans benefits to people who want to go join the IDF, but there's all these benefits that are not properly getting to veterans. I mean, come on.
Right. Like, no. So, like, I don't know. Again, going off of that, like, as I said, Shapiro is the worst of the bunch. So, but it's not like any of them I'm like excited about either. So, because they're all going to be a variation of a Zionist on some way, shape, or form. So, like,
correct.
So it really doesn't matter ultimately. Yes, Shapiro was IDF. Like, I'm seeing online, like, no, he was in a kibbutz or whatever. doesn't matter. Like, you still have ties to the IDF. So
Steve taking a jab at you. What's up, Steve? From AM Wake Up. He says, "Hey fellas, Collin thinks elections are real."
when did I ever say elections are
Nah,
real?
he doesn't. He's giving a jab at you, just having some fun with you. I mean, and Steve is probably laughing at me too. He's like, Marcus is over here arguing this stuff as if he believes in it.
No,
he's like,
no, I don't think it's that. Our thing right now is trying to have others not believe in the hype. Like, I'm sure our audience generally is wised up to that, but again, it's just the idea. Like, I'm seeing, it's just kind of like, you weren't willing to go vote for Biden because of Gaza and all this other stuff, but Kamala ain't any different, but you're willing to vote for her. Like why the change up?
no,
Like,
I mean, it's
because it's a different person, just because you think that you're able to. And it's funny that I haven't seen anyone try the "we'll push her left" thing. Like,
oh no, they're not even caring about that right now.
They're not even caring about that anymore. It's just now they're just straight up vote shaming you now. It's just like, but no, so it just shows me you weren't serious. But then again, I shouldn't be surprised because a lot of them were that way for BLM George Floyd. Like,
yeah, I if y'all want to know how I really feel, I feel everything is going along to plan. That's the reason why I think that there is very good possibility that Kamala could win, because the powers that be win either way. Because
right. I mean,
the next thing that they want is they want a lot of tech censorship. If you look at it, well, not only tech censorship, but a whole lot of stuff with tech as far as the CBDCs, about the real ID, about like some of this fingerprinting and all this stuff that's going on, which they want to use, facial recognition scanners and all that stuff. Kamala is all in on the tech side of that, and JB Vance is all in on the tech side of that. So either way, if it's Israel, it's going to go in this direction. If it's going to go the war machine, it's going to go in this direction. Either way you go. So on all those top issues, it's going to go the way that the major corporations want anyway. The only difference is social issues.
right.
If somebody gets to stand in and say they're trying to fight against Christianity, that's all it's boiling down to. And people arguing about trans bathrooms when it comes down to it. That's the only real thing that people are going to be fighting on as far as legislations. All the rest of the stuff is basically an autopilot, in my opinion. Y'all can disagree, but that's just my point.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the only reason why we vote or are summoned to vote is to kind of give the illusion.
That's what we say all the time.
Is to
give the illusion
that we have a democracy and that people actually do have a say. But the idea is it doesn't really matter who you vote for because it's a uniparty. It's just various degrees of crazy, but it's all crazy at the end of the day. And you really don't have a say.
Yeah, we say all the time, that's the moment that this system is delegitimized, then you'll see the hardcore, furious, authoritarian crackdown state that they have already set up and planned. Then you'll see the real, and then that's when it'll come to how much do you really want to fight and stuff for your actual real freedom, not this patriotic freedom stuff that the right screams about. Real freedom, like, so I will leave it at that. That's my thoughts. I don't know, Collin. Do you have a last word on that? And also let everybody know where they can find you at.
The only last word I could say is that we're fucked. Evil. Like, you can vote if you want to. I wouldn't tell anybody. I mean, I have my opinion. I would prefer people not to. Well, I'll say this. Let me back up a bit. Like, if you have ballot initiatives in your state, yes, I would say definitely vote for those things because you have the most direct democracy in that regard. and those are the things that you should care for the most anyway. So definitely vote for those things. But like, in as far as on the federal level, I don't care. Like, I won't. Like, I'm going to leave that section blank. Yep, Rick, Couch 2024. That's me. Most likely. So other than that, you can find me on Twitter. You guys know me, but you can find me on Twitter at Obona_Collin. You can find me in terms of INN. You can either go to indienews.network. You can find all my links there, or you can find me on YouTube on my show, INN News, with my co-host Reef Breland. Wednesday nights at 9.
You know, I still haven't got Reef on here yet. My apologies, Reef. I'll try to get you on here sometime soon. It's been years and I've never gotten him on the show, but my bad. I'll get you on the show.
But yeah, I've taken a little bit of a break the last few weeks just for personal stuff, but you know, but I'll be back. Yeah, I'll be back this week. You know, on the show, and so yeah. So, but you guys know me, so guys know where to find me and all that. So,
and you know, you're always welcome to swing through. So just let
Appreciate
me know
it.
if you ever see me live, whatever. I'll toss a link to you, no problem. And some of you other content creators that y'all know, y'all can always come and holler. And if you're not a content creator and you do want to just be able to speak on this platform and kind of hop in, reach out to me and we could try to set something up to get some of you guys on here. I want to try to have a show where it's viewers. So I'll set that up one of these days where people can hop in here, provided they don't do anything crazy or weird. And give your perspectives. I do enjoy hearing from you guys directly, and sometimes it's better to hear a voice than to only read what you guys say. So that said, much appreciated. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Collin.
Oh, no problem. And shout out to Chris who left, but shout out
to my bro. Much love, Chris. I'll hit you up. I'll holler at you later.
All right.
That said, this has been a Political Matrix. I'm Young Morpheus. Y'all have a great weekend. And for those who believe in powers above, God bless you. Peace.